Welcome to this serene setting, where time no longer weighs on your mind and breathing is a breeze. You are here now resting still under the soft weight of sleep, while the past creeps open like an opening door. Let the world beyond wear away into the stillness as we move slow, deliberate steps into another age. We are going to ancient Greece, not to watch great men speak or walk amidst marble pillars, but to follow women whose existence went largely undocumented in houses with candlelight. Women called Hittairai or Pornai companions, and workers with names lost to the wind. They were neither veiled wives sequestered nor enslaved bound speechless, but something ethereal in between. They lived in small rooms and moved through crowds. They heard, they laughed, they stood in hush. They were educated or not, wealthy or not, praised or not, depending on who said it and who listened. Tonight we follow them unjudged, unenthusiastic, unshadowed by shame or respect. We are here only to look, to understand, to see the moving quietly stream of their day from first light until dusk. A day shaped by routine, by gesture, by labor, and by the strange liberty that was never truly free. Our story will continue in 4 parts, each one like a chamber dimly lit and slowly opened one after another. We begin with the very slow pulse of daily life, the rising, the washing, the selectivity of words and garments. Then we move into the world of Aspasia, a woman known for both her intelligence and her connections. There we move into enigma and symbol, into temples, into sacrifice, and statues weathered by time. What does the earth say? What is broken in bits and altars, and silence that still has a voice? Finally, we turn our eyes to the world of respectable wives and daughters, kept well distant from music and words. For now, we begin in the quiet. Ahead of dawn, in a house with a narrow bed and a broken clay floor. The lamp has gone out, the shutters are closed, but the city is waking up outside the quiet clay walls, and the woman who sleeps here isn't yet awake. But the day is already waiting just outside her breath. She stirs slowly, not frightened, not shocked, with the kind of movement which comes from habit. There is no rush in her limbs, no sudden sound, but instead smooth dragging of muscle and shoulder and neck. The linen sheet upon her is coarse but familiar, and the air carries a faint smell of wax and dust and night. The window is not out to the street, but out to a courtyard, where there is a babbling fountain and cats sleeping on stone. She waits before she goes, listening to the distant turn of cartwheels and the great bellow of a cellar. The room is still like a bowl of water, and she stands without considering, only quiet, practiced ease. Her name is not inscribed. Perhaps it was Thaleia, or Dione, or something the city has forgotten ages ago. She is not poor, but she is not rich either. She manages with wit, beauty, patience, and care. Her life is not characterized by liberty, but by getting through between invitation, expectation, and constraint. Her bedroom is small, but not inhospitable. Its walls are dusted with lime and time. Low cot leans against the back wall, lined with sewn linen repaired where moths once dined. A blackened clay oil lamp stands at the edge of a wooden stool beside a rolled-up wrap for cold mornings. A little chest rests beside her feet, hand-carved with a curling vine design along its edge. There are a few tunics, 2 belts, a paint jar, a frayed comb, and a set of plain earrings. Each item occupies its niche. Each morning begins with the peaceful ritual of reasserting order to her universe. She bathes in cold water carried in a clay pot, filled this morning early by the neighborhood fountain. The water touches her hands, her face, her feet, every movement slow, as though rinsing out the last stream. She dries on a fragment of linen, then oils her skin with olive crushed over summer, mixed with dry myrtle. The water smells faintly of stone and copper, its chill reminding her she is still a part of the earth. She strokes her fingers slowly along, her arms across the collarbone, her legs in slow, even passes of quiet regard. This isn't luxury, but discipline, a way of smoothing a surface for the piece she has to play out this day. There is no glassy mirror, but bronze disc, and slightly softened, that still holds a soft reflection. She examines her face, not out of vanity, but purposefully, because her appearance is part of her profession. The lines she draws, the pins she places, the cascading cloth across her shoulder are all carefully planned decisions. Her eyes are resolute as she works with coal and powdered ash, defining the lids and shading in the lashes. She mixes a touch of red earth with a drop of oil and applies it to her cheeks with the end of her finger. Her lips she colors, but not excessively, since it is morning and the hours ahead require subtlety and not sensationalism. She does not dress for love. She dresses for power, for subtle visibility, for others' response. A modestly dyed robe, a belt that is cinched just so, and earrings that glint without calling too much to them. She becomes the woman. She must be not always the woman. She is not yet, not quite, not today. Her sandals rest beside the chest, one strap worn from walking along long, sun-drenched streets. She collects them up, but does not yet put them on. Instead, she wanders barefoot across the chilly stone floor. She feels the day's grain beneath her, the weight of time seeping into her bones. Outside, a dove coos softly above the roof as smoke rises from a brazier in a neighboring garden. The city does not rush to wake. It slowly unrolls itself like a scroll, unrolling in firm hands. Athens in early light is whisper not shouted, breathes before speaking. It stretches before moving. She sits beside the shutter and watches the sky begin to whiten, waiting for her day to reveal itself in soft layers. The sun shines on rooftop, summits causing clay to turn gold and marble soft warm ivory. Sounds drift up from the street beneath two boys and an argument about figs, a dog as bark, a stillness. She consumes her morning meal by stages with last night's bread in watered wine or olive oil. Sometimes she has cheese or a fig, or some olives occasionally, sometimes nothing when coin has been sparse. But this morning, there is enough a little bite, consumed without hurry, without starvation, without thought this eating, sitting with back, straight watching the shadows fall on the wall opposite, like down silken things. Her mind is not empty of thought. It turns the names, the promises, the visits, the hesitant invitations of last night. She does the math on who may come today, who may not, who may bring coin, and who may request credit again. The work she does is not merely of the body, but of hearing, of smiling, of reading the unsaid aloud. It is to be a keeper of the quiet, a learner of honor, a player without stage or lines. It is a life that demands presence but rarely offers rest, that calls for attention but refuses belonging. She holds out her writing tablet and wood, and covered with wax, and goes over her marks from the week. Some scribbled names, a date, circled a note in shorthand. Only she can read about an old man. But she has learned how to remember, how to remain vigilant, how to never find herself unprepared. She does not write poetry. A knock on the front door assures her that time doesn't stop it, just slows for those who intend. It might be a child offering to braid her hair, or a neighbor bringing tidings of someone who has died. It might be a request for help, or a whispered warning, or merely the break of another dawn, resembling the last one. She stows her tablet, smooths her robe, and pushes back her hair in a slack knot held in place by bone pins. Her movements soft but deliberate, her gestures all of an acquired language, learned not with words, but with survival. She moves away from the window, and morning light lingers behind her slowly, as if unwilling to release her. A cinnamon air now stale with wisps of ash and thyme, from fires cooked in nearby houses by women she will never know. They all have their own path, their own rhythm, their own war fought on silent walls or in noisy open spaces. And yet there is a universality between them, a strand woven quietly from hand to hand, from breath to breath. She is standing here in the center of her room, not hurried, not frozen, just still, as if measuring out the hours ahead of her. She does not pray aloud, but her thoughts turn to the gods she is familiar with too well to believe in entirely or to disbelieve entirely. A name breathed softly beneath her breath, for Aphrodite or Hermes, or no one specifically, just sound to break the silence. This is her morning, and it is not beautiful, and it is not tragic. It simply is the beginning of another day, a day that will require something from her, perhaps everything, perhaps nothing, but will arrive all the same. And she will walk through it, not as others see her, but as she has built herself one breath at a time. And while the city brightens and comes to life, she eases back the shutter a little to let the light in fully. One beam crosses her feet, and the shadow that it casts is long and quiet and still and hers. And for an instant, before words, before footsteps, before gesture and coin, she is just here. When the morning has settled and the quiet rituals are done, the door opens to the day. She enters the courtyard where sun spills on the stones in moving patches of warmth. The city welcomes her, not with ceremony, but with the simple movement of life already underway. Athens is awake, now its streets alive, with sandal steps, cartwheels, low voices, and market cries. Men advance in throngs, talking with sweeping arms as they proceed towards the agora, or public square. Boys run ahead of them, competing with each other between pillars, their laughter echoing off walls, plastered with buildings. She advances with calculated purpose, not rushed, not uncertain, her body accustomed to advancing in each glance. Each head turn, each step part of her sensing, for to advance here is also to perform. She does not pass unseen, nor does she try to make herself invisible. She makes herself visible in silence. Other women remain indoors, their eyes hidden behind wooden panels built high on the street. They live in the oikos, in inner space, bounded by expectation, by marriage, by modesty, and by law. She walks alone, unveiled, without male escort, and that in itself marks her to all eyes. Some tip their hats, while others don't even glance at her, some whisper as she goes by. She is known to some, not to others, but never entirely without meaning on the street. She is part of the city's beat, not hidden, not entirely embraced, but unquestionably there to behold. Her mission can be a client or a party, or simply a walk to be seen and remembered. Reputation is her capital, and visibility her investment. So she walks with composure and command. It is not the walk of pride, but of self-control of years, perfecting how to shape presence into value. Sometimes, however, she is invited to a symposium, although not all affairs are of the same tone or intention. The more refined can include poetry, music, philosophy, and restrained conversation, shared over thinned wine. The coarser encounters involve no more than her presence, her laughter, and her well-practiced ability to endure. But noon is not yet for performance. It is for preparation for interweaving her part in the forthcoming day. She might stop to nod to another hetaira, exchanging glances, information, or discreet warnings as they go by. They rarely speak openly, for words travel round, but even silence between them is meaningful. She purchases a fresh fig from an old woman beside a worn awning who does not need her to know her name. They recognize each other the way people do in silence, knowing only the contours of habit. A coin is exchanged, the fruit placed in her hand, warm with sun and sweet with late summer ripeness. At the edge of the agora, she pauses, not to enter, but to listen, to hear the throb of the city. Men discuss beneath statues, speak of grain, of taxes, of war, and alliances, none of it for her to listen. But she does listen, and stores and knows, for knowledge is a shield far more often than charm. She steps out of the crowd toward the edge of the neighborhood, where streets become narrow and slope. This is where the city is formed by the artisans, the potters, the sandal makers, the men with fingers that shape the city. They glance up as she passes by, their eyes less critical, more curious, or simply habitually indifferent. She takes refuge beside a column, the heat beginning to beat with the weight of midday sun. A slave boy passes by with a jug of water, spilling over the edge and dampening his tunic to the knees. The smell of hot bread comes from a bakery, its door open to the street and thrumming with silent motion. She navigates patches of stillness, even in the commotion, and melts into one of them, now folding her hands demurely. She doesn't fit this rhythm, but she walks in it, adjusting, adapting, still just a part. Neither closed nor really free, she inhabits a city, but always a little beside it, always looking. Sometimes she visits a herbalist near the olive press, whose shelves are lined with jars of muted hue. She buys roots to grind into a powder, or dried petals to infuse into wine or oil according to her requirement. The woman at the counter is not asked questions. Her job is one of quietude and simple transaction. She examines fabric draped across a wooden stand, the dyer extending a tunic in muted tones of purple. She runs her hand over the fabric, testing it for weight, for drape, for if it will pick up lamplight quietly. She does not buy today, but the dyer smiles and nods in comprehension that she will return when money is in her hand. Passing by a sculptor who works marble under a tarp, she sees dust stir up in glittering clouds. The shape emerging from stone is still crude torso, without arms, a face without features or sound, and for a moment she imagines herself in it, half-formed, half-concealed, waiting to be called and shaped again. She stops by a cistern to throw water over her wrists, to cool her skin and watch the ripples create. The well is deep and still, and has the echo of voices long gone, like a memory not to be touched. She closes her eyes for only a breath of time, long enough to feel the gap between task and task. Under the portico, she removes her sandals to ease the ache of her feet from the morning path. A boy offers her a fig leaf to sit on, and she accepts it, with a silent smile and a single nod of gratitude. They say few words, and yet the moment is present like dust in a beam of a sun's golden light. She occasionally watches the birds more than the others, discovering how they take what they need without asking. A dove drinks from a shattered bowl on the square, while a crow bounds over the rooftop to crumbs and leavings. She speculates what it would be like to steal, without being caught, to travel, without being trailed or remembered. It is not her moment to shine, but her moment to plan, to measure, to wait, without appearing idle. She might be invited later to eat, to accompany, to perform, to speak, or just to listen and smile. But now she lets the sun cross over her, lets the city keep going on around her, lets herself become still again. The market becomes quiet a bit in the heat, the voices spreading thin, the shade becoming thick with prolonged silence. Women come back burdened through alleys, baskets on their arms, with bread, cheese, greens, and clay vessels. The city's breathing is slowing now, its pulse steady, but eased by the weight of the afternoon. She returns unhurried, but with the unbroken confidence of a woman who knows the contours of every stone. Walking same split steps, same curled ivy, same carved lintels, as if reading loved lines. Her fingers brush a vine as she crosses her feet, walking, as it were in rhythm, with something older than the day's mark. She will lie down in the cool darkness of her chamber, where air is heavy with the scent of myrtle and oil. She will fill a small goblet of diluted wine, not to drink quickly, but to slip between draughts and deliberation. She may write a name on her wax tablet or erase one from yesterday's date if the promise did not come about. The light begins to shift into something softer as she extends out on the couch and closes her eyes. Not to slumber, but to gather herself, to shake off the load of morning and prepare for whatever is to be. And in that space between light and twilight, between labor and darkness, she simply breathes again. She ventures once again into the open air, and the night greets her not with shock, but with comprehension. It envelops her like a known cloak, cool, along the collarbone, warm, where fire glows. The street is mostly empty save for a dog that crouches under a fig cart and a man who scoops dust into piles. She glides back slowly through the alleys that ringed her childhood, the walls scrawled with names years past. Her sandals catch on known cracks. The rhythm of her feet march into ideas she keeps contained. Each shadow she passes under holds a memory, not all of them hers, but gathered like yarn in the folds of her skirt. The city is changed under moonlight, not softer exactly, but less sharp, less certain, less kept in place. The white stones do not blind in sunlight, but shine weakly, as though internally lit by tailies beneath them. Even the columns lean inward, listening in on things the day would break up or talk down. She does not go home right away. The night is not finished with her, and she is not finished with it. There is a small court behind the baths, where the vines crawl wild and the stone still holds warmth. She slips through the slender alley between two ancient structures where the walls pull back. Just enough. She sits unsummoned upon without having to posture or prepare, and leans. Back against cool marble above her, the stars are slow to appear, but they do so eventually blinking through thin clouds in unsynchronized rhythm. She gazes up at them with no prayer or hope, but simply patience, as one would wait for the face of an old acquaintance. Her fingers toy with a sprig of mint left on the rim of the basin that morning. She takes it to her lips, habit, not hunger, lets it rest. There lets the smell take hold in her, and for one instant she is not performer, not vessel, not symbol, but body and breath and moment. Sometimes she tries to imagine what it would be like to forget all that she knows how to be, to think up no mirror, no name, no script, no one's expectations, lightly pressed into her skin, to wake and choose silence, not as a means but as a truth, and let it follow her freely like a child. But she knows such thoughts are extravagances. She cannot indulge, not because forbiddens, but because she is too intricately built out of the layers that she has constructed through necessity and survival. She would not know how to be without them, and the possibility terrifies her more than it entices her. A voice had once told her that women like her carry cities in their silences, that every choice they make is not so much theirs, but informed by the eyes that will see them next. She has carried that voice as a stone in her pocket, heavy, not unkind, but steadying and insistent. She stands once more dusting her robe, as if sweeping away the weight of the thought itself. The courtyard fades into the background, and she walks along the long curve of the street that leads to her tiny door. Thin light pours from her window, where oil lamp still burns forgotten, but steadfast in darkness. There is a lavender and linen scent in the room, and something else, something akin to time itself. She shuts the shutters, but does not lock them, and prefers instead the night air to fill in through the cracks. And in that stillness she finally allows herself to uncoil, to release her breath, to allow her shoulders to forget the day. She lays out her jewels, individually on a tiny terracotta plate, the noise soft like water on skin. The earrings, the necklace, the thin wedding ring from her mother, each one a story she no longer tells aloud. Her hair she slowly unbraid, each spiral, a memory, each undone a soft unwinding of who she had to be. The robe drops off her like water, and she folds it carefully, not reverently, but habitually. She stands, nude in the light of the lamp, and looks down at her own flesh, neither judging nor admiring, merely looking. This is the flesh they claim. This is the voice they recite. This is the body they lean toward and away from. She lies on her stone couch, which is not cruel or gentle, but simply what it is, familiar. And she listens to the room around her, the distant sigh of wood, the distant singing of a lyre. The world is not yet asleep, and she is not yet a member of it. She is halfway in between. There are not yet any dreams, but just the gradual emergence of thought unmoored from need or display. She recalls the boy who brought the message, and how young he was, and how tired. She recalls the man who read Homer, and how his voice shook a little on the word nostos, home. She recalls the woman in the corner, who never spoke a word all night, but watched everything. And she asks herself who watches her, like that, what she sees, if they see, or merely want. And if people see how difficult it is to navigate the world, keeping yourself just slightly outside of it. The ceiling over her is cracked in one long line, like a white marble vein. She stares at it, as if it could move or respond, or whisper something that only the night knows. And when her eyes at last close, it is not from fatigue, but from the peace of not being watched. Outside of Athens, sleeps not so much, but deeply enough to dream. The torches burned lower, the courtyards remain, the fountains whisper in half-sleep. And the woman with the braided hair again stops haunting us, a symbol, a mask, a myth, but rather a person wrapped in silence, a breath beneath linen, a thought too delicate to voice aloud. Tomorrow she will rise again, not startled, not rushed, and the ceremony will be enacted just as always. But tonight she is nothing more than she allows herself to be, uncompleted, unseen, and whole in the quiet. And in the quiet, there is a memory that rises unsummoned a moment in her. Girlhood beneath a fig tree, where her mother sang low and wordless, touching tangles from her hair with olive-oiled hands. She remembers how she leaned into that heat, half annoyed, half comforted the way only children can. She had not yet formed then the habit of wearing herself like armor, the head turned in conversation. She hadn't yet spoken the language of pause, of glance, of measured modesty. She now speaks so effortlessly. The girl sitting under the fig tree and the woman standing near. The shutter are acquaintances, but never meet in the same breath. She is curious to know the appearance of the fig tree is still bearing fruits, if the roots of it have gone deeper. If other women fill this place now with baskets or secrets, or in weight of voices to shape them into something new. She knows the tree likely forgets her, as all places ultimately forget anyone who departs from them. Time turns in her world instead of lines, and what is lost can fold again into the present without remark. A scent, a sound, a word half learned can deposit her elsewhere in another room, another skin, another rhythm, and she does not struggle against it. She lets it approach, lets the recollections flood the gap, the way music fills itself up before sleep. She curls onto her side, now bringing in her knees, one hand under her cheek, the other on her abdomen. It is a childish position and an ancient one, the body, stretching toward its own refuge, even after the threat has passed. The stone beneath her is cold, but familiar, and she is no longer complete in the room. But halfway between, the stars outside shift unseen, slowly and steadily, and the moon has traveled far enough to change the light. She sleeps finally, but not with visions, with feeling a soft wind on bare shoulders, a wordless voice. And the night receives her without question, without need, without naming. She will reappear again, not as herself complete, but as that version of herself the world requires. And each version carries some truth, even the fakes, even the things constructed for show. But for now, here in this small moment of peace, before light, she is just breath, just heat, just waiting. This too is her story, not the one that is spoken in laughter or in money or in poetry, but the one known only in stillness. And in the city somewhere a cat stretches a watcher, opens her eyes, a torch burns lower, and another night floats away on memory. And a woman behind a shutter sleeps under a cracked ceiling and dreams not of flight, but of being left unshaped, not remembered, not praised, not called, not touched, only allowed, only real, only here. She stands at the edge of the courtyard, where the stone is warm with the day's sun, and where vines climb up uncoiled caressing. Her skin like secret words, the air rich with the scent of earth and moldy leaves. She breathes deeply, letting the night fall around her, and the quiet seep into the spaces between her thoughts. Her fingers rub against the rough walls, smoothed by time and memory, tracing back through years to graze the girl. She was the girl shaped by these narrow streets and hidden places. The sky above is a languid tapestry of dark indigo that stirs softly under a sprinkling of stars that blink modestly through the filmy clouds. With each breath, these memories and the strange likeness of having lived on with the layers of the past woven deeply into the fabric of herself. The world beyond this tiny pocket feels distant, muffled, like a half-remembered dream that dissolves with each attempt to bring it closer. She knows the risk of unraveling too far and the pain of remembering too little, because to forget is to lose the very foundation on which she has built herself. But of the thick quiet of watching and waiting, of holding the eyes of those who would judge and those who would keep. There falls a thin light softly from her window, where the oil lamp burns forgotten, but in earnest, its gentle heat a quiet promise in the darkness. She closes the shutters, but doesn't latch them, opting instead for letting night air creep softly through cracks, carrying world sounds in without expecting that she close it all up. In quietness, she permits herself to let go, to let lower breaths slow, to unlearn tension of the day, the constant, holding of herself bound up tightly in folds of necessity, naked in the gentle lamplight. She looks down on her body, not judging, not looking at her in admiration, but simply seeing, this is the body they require. This is the voice they repeat. This is the delicate vessel that holds all that she has carried throughout the days and nights, throughout silence and speech, throughout hope and fear. She thinks of the boy who brought the message, how young he was, how tired and unsure, his face a reflection of the thin hope that still clings to the city as alleys. She thinks of the man who read Homer, and how his voice trembled slightly on the word nostos, home yearning for return, that lies in all who wander whisper in half-sleep, and the woman with the braided hair once again drops to be not a symbol, not a mask, not a myth, but a person wombed in silence. A breath under linen, a thought too fine to speak aloud tomorrow. She will awaken again, not surprised, not rushed, and the ritual will begin as it begins every time. But tonight, she is only what she allows herself, to be unfinished, unseen, and whole in the darkness of the night. Her she carries that voice in her pocket, like a rock heavy, not bitter. She listens to the room, the groaning of wood that is only just audible, the distant music of a lyre on the stagnant air. The world has not slept, but neither has she. And she is curious about who observes her so intently what they see, whether they see or merely desire to see, and whether anyone is aware of how difficult it is to navigate the world keeping yourself a little apart, as if guarding some tender center. She is somewhere in the middle of waking and sleeping in the middle of night, and day in the middle of what has been and what might be. She stares at it as though it might rouse, reply, or mutter secrets only the dark understands. And when her eyelids finally close, they are not from fatigue, but from the peace of going unseen, the calm that comes with not being looked for the easy. Let go of just being the earrings, the necklace, the small ring from her mother, each one a story swathed in quiet minutes and silent. Determination stories she no longer must speak aloud. Her fingers move slowly and softly as she comb out her hair, each twist releasing a memory, a soft unmaking of the armor that she wore when eyes were upon her, but grounding an unwavering reminder. She is beholden to more than herself, to a legacy of women who lived and loved and struggled before her, but out of habit developed in earlier days, so that the pale green scent settles deep inside like a recollection of small plain things that remain steadfast when the rest wears off. The flavor is clean cutting and tender all at once, an evanescent offering to anchor her errant thoughts and the stories placed on her, to wake up without the names, without the roles, without the silent scripts written by others and herself. To be in silence, not as a protection or a mask, but as a naked unspoken truth, like the quietness of the night that holds everything and nothing, simultaneously like a child let free into a world vast and wild and unbridled. She can sense the cool marble under her back, holding fast to the present as the city breathes softly around her, and the distant murmur of voices and footsteps becomes part of the night's soft song. Her fingers encounter a sprig of mint left behind on the edge of the basin, and she raises it to her lips, not out of need. She closes her eyes, and the memories come slowly like waves, rising separately, the faces, the voices, the laughter and the silences, the broken and made promises, the discovered strength in moments she thought she would break, but did not. Sometimes she wants to know what it was like to shed all these layers, to leave aside all the expectations. But these are things she cannot indulge in, because she is woven too fine from the materials of survival, from shades of need. Each scar a thread in the fabric she wears, and without them, she would be lost unmoored in an ocean without land. A voice once told her that women like her carry whole cities in their silences, that their silence holds the weight of untold histories, their power not of loud mouths. She stands up slowly, brushing dust off her robe, as if trying to shake the burden of thought, and the night starkness from her behind her. The courtyard fades into shadow as she walks the long curve of the street, the ancient stones under her feet familiar and immemorial, leading her home, in her room. The air is chilly and smells half of lavender and linon, mixed with the older something that lives in touched places by memory and time. She places them singly on a small clay plate, the soft clinking of metal against clay raindrops on skin. The robe drapes from her body like water from stone creased in wise hands, not in reverence, but in the habit of one well aware of this ritual. She lies back on the stone couch that is neither hard nor soft, but just what it is, strong, steady under her. There are no dreams, but the slow rise of thoughts free of need or performance, drifting quietly like leaves, caught in a still stream, free to wander without aim or demand. She recalls the woman in the back who spoke not a word all evening, but took in everything, her eyes alert and unblinking as though seeing the world differently than other people do. The plaster on her head cracked in one long line like a vein of white marble, an elegant fracture bound together by some unspoken strength outside Athens. Sleeps not all, but deeply enough to dream. The torches burn low the courtyards, are quiet the fountains. Dawn creeps gradually into the city, casting weak light over narrow windows and casting long shadows along old stone streets. The air is quiet and cool with the slightest breath of olive scent and distant salt from the sea. The world holds its breath between the dark and the light, poised in the delicate moment when nothing yet has occurred and everything converges to start. She comes out of the quiet room, where night still lingers like a soft sigh, stroking her skin with the tenderness of an ancient tune lost. She moves with the careful poise of someone well acquainted with every curve and every burden, every scar and story carried in the flesh. The breeze carries the smell of jasmine and dust, and something ancient, something like a promise made in the knuckles of the earth. The sellers arrange their goods with practiced ease, heaping olives, figs, and pomegranates, spilling richness into baskets and cloths. The music merges the clink of pottery, the drone of haggling, and the soft laughter of children racing from stand to stand. The words remain suspended in the air, like a thread that unites past and present, tying her to the extended chain of souls that have walked these streets before. The city whispers in stories and silence in the beat of feet and the rumor of the sea. And she, with an unmoving heart, listens for her part in the unfolding story. Her fingers brush against the chill rims of the carved columns, tracing patterns etched by weather and time, and the soft fingers of strangers, so many invisible hands. Warm sun strokes her face as if sanctifying the day with a gentle promise. The city and the woman and the stories are bound together in the soft light of morning, in the vibration of life that never slows, becoming and being endlessly. She senses the weight of all those who sat prior to sitting there, their lives inscribed like faint prints into the grain of the stone. Breathes a symphony of soft sounds, the soft rustle of leaves on the olive trees, the distant clank of a cart across cobblestones. The balmy wind carries far-off laughter, the hum of the salutations made like threads piling folk into the tapestry of day. The streets glimmer in new light, now revealing every detail, every crack and crevice, every history in stone and mortar. She walks with wonder and ease, the familiar landscape unfolding right around her like a map of memory and hope. The smell of fresh bread mixes with perfumed spices. A glint of burnished metal catches sunbeams like stars sewed on the earth. She weaves through the crowd like a strand embroidering her story into the great tapestry around her, a peaceful presence both part of and apart from the tide. She squeezes her eyes shut for a moment, engulfing the caress of this animate living world, the pulsate of bridging beneath the surface. The melodies stroke her like a shawl, a reminder of something forgotten but not lost. The city encompasses her, the unspoken guarantee of continuity and change, tapestry rich in each stone and breath. The day belongs to her, to shape, to sail through with all the elegance and force she can muster. She takes a deep breath of the scent of jasmine and dust sea, brine on the wind, sun heat on skin, and it fills her with energy. She sings the song and whispers her, lips barely moving, a wordless prayer, a bridge between what is and what may be. She moves not hurried, not guarded, but with the deliberate assurance of one who knows that life is an unfolding, a becoming, a dance of unlimited possibility and still power. Her fingers glide softly over its surface, as if mapping out invisible lives and visions. intertwined with her own. The quietness of heart to stand when confronted with change, to cling when the world's winds try to tear everything apart. She remembers the faces of the men that she has loved and lost, the things that were never spoken that tie her still today, and she draws in a deep breath, filling herself to the brim with the world and its magnitude, its limitless potential. Her thoughts are slow and measured, weaving in and out of memories and plans like threads pulled loosely through the loom of the day. With each breath she takes is a soft declaration, a claim in the life that she lives, and the choices that she makes in the infinite dance of becoming and belonging. She does not hurry for the morning, requires no hasty, welcomes only the ceaseless disclosure of an old ritual older than memory itself. The child's smile is a sunburst in the warm morning sun, a reminder of promise and beginnings. The woman feels suddenly filled with a warmth and an ache deep in her belly, the bittersweet recognition of all that was and all that is to be. The small oil lamp smokes low on the windowsill, a faithful sentinel of the night, burning to flame as shadows grow and fading as the light brightens. She gets ready, choosing each garment, carefully sewing herself over again, each fold and fastening a prayer, a shield against the din of the day. The city treats her as an old friend, reliable and steadfast, giving her space to weave through its endless tailies. Her heart is filled with the rhythm of the streets, the slow vibration of a life that is both delicate and stormy. The streets are coming to life now, bathed in the soft light of dawn, warming the white stones that glimmer thinly like the remnants of moon trapped in their depths. Every step forward a cry, a weaving of self and space, a quietness of refusal against the world's incessant demands. Every corner has a story, a fragment of 1,000 lives twisted into the fabric of this ancient city. The city is alive, beating slowly and profoundly with the pulse of those which call it home. Outside, the city changes. Far-off noises, drifting through the open shutters, a soft chorusing of voices, footsteps, and the distant shout of a market stirring. Her sandals touch the stone ground with familiar softness, the rhythm never changing and hard beneath her feet. She walks past the fountains, where water trickles like secrets in half-remembered whispers over polished stone, catching the light in small shimmering droplets. The bazaar erupts in color, a quiet burst of fruit and cloth voices mingling in early light. She remains standing, watching the action unfold, the everyday miracle of life, unfolding of strangers, rushing by in stories, beginning anew. A man passes by, quoting a line of Homer, his voice strong and steady, carrying the weight of history and expectation. She makes her way through the crowd, the relentless rhythm of her feet keeping pace with the pulse of the city. Morning collects around her silently, with confident quiet, the higher climbing sun, the richer colors, and the sounds that merge in one grand chorus. She carries with her the silence and voice of power, the strength in moments of quiet, and the courage in the smallest movements. And as the day stretches out before her, she goes on, knowing she is part of something huge, something ancient and unshakable. She pauses alongside a weathered stone bench, old and worn from countless days and countless hands, placed upon it for momentary relief or hushed meeting. Around her, the city, her thoughts stray back in time to the little things that have shaped her, the things she has learned in silence, the victories that were whispered only to herself. As the day rises higher, the shadows retreat, folding back into town corners. She brushes past a child, clutching a small bundle of flowers, eyes wide with wonder and innocence. The market hums now with fully human voices, ebbing and flowing, a living song, thick in the texture of lives entwined. The song's memory drifts on the breeze, a melody old and soft carried on the wind. Time unspools and stretches as she walks down the recognizable streets, her steps reliable and anchored to the moment, even as her heart travels through the levels of past and future. She thinks of the faces she will meet, the stories she will hear, the moments she will hold dear like precious things that are buried deep within. Her heart beats with a quietness of recognition, a feeling that she belongs to this moment and this place, that her life is woven into the limitless expansion of the city and its people. And as the light grows stronger and day becomes fully being, she carries with her the rich and aged melody of the city, the endless tapestry of tale, the unspoken vow of beginnings, and the quiet power of those who walk its streets with open hearts and open eyes, forever becoming forever being. The sun has come up fully now, but it doesn't yet blaze. It lies like a quiet sentinel along the edge of the rooftops, golden and silky through linen curtains and morning dust. The shadows that had danced in the streets have shortened into still figures, clinging to walls and benches and fountains that have seen thousands of days like this. The city unwinds into its rhythm, like a body slowly waking from sleep, and each gust of wind seems to carry a memory not ancient, but lived and close. She moves through this waking life as if born of its stone, her step firm and unhesitant, her eyes calm and watchful, soaking up what others skirt. Her fingertips brush the walls of buildings weathered with ivy, inscribed with names some recalled, now most long ago forgotten, and she listens from the bricks as if they could respond not in words, but in the heat. A hold from bodies leaned against them once or twice, or over and over again. Stories go in glances, in brief titters, in a hand supporting another on the edges of a crowd. She values this invisible tapestry more than any price would place on it, values the way the world holds fast with these unassuming kindnesses, with people touching lives without reaching too far to leave an impression. She has always felt the city's hum beneath her like a still secondary heartbeat, slow and constant, and going on and on. The walls of stone are close by and cool, and in their shadowings she finds quiet not empty, but filled with memory. There is comfort in the way in which people return to words like these, like a road that is well known, like a well that will not let her down, and she thinks again of all the prayers, spoken not for answer, but for anchoring, for remembering, for movement. The Pr0stitutes stand is still open. Though the potter has gone, only his work is left, neat rows of red clay cups to dry in the sun, each growing slowly hotter in the light. Her feet also recognize the way on, though her head is elsewhere, and she lets it drift, she lets it go over fields she knows nothing, and rooms she never enter. She walks like tracing something ancient, not behind, but before, not following, but choosing each step in unspoken trust, and she stops there to run her hand over the surface of one smooth and cool as river rock. She thinks nothing and everything about how the day began and how it will be, stretched out like thread on a spool, ready to be woven into something whole. She doesn't yet know what shape the day will be, what words she will speak, what moments will call her attention, but she knows she will give them. She always does. She comes back into its arms, not lost, not found, but going on. And the tale takes breath with her every instant, a possibility, not as script, but as becoming. And the sun rises higher, casting her shadow far behind. Her not to pursue her, but to remind her she is always multiple. One thing, always body and breath and becoming. Here is where she used to hide when the world had been too loud, too pointed, and she would burrow into the leaves and imagine that the air was unable to find her. Her name is not invoked, but it is heard. Anyway, not vocally, but in the manner the world yields to her path, the manner space unfolds a little when she gets up and begins anew. Her sandals tread lightly into the path, taken by many before and many after her, and her body moves like water flowing, not compelled, not hemmed. It is not a summons, but a calculated beat of time, of presence, of passing. And it enters into her bones with a weight that is blessing, not burden. This is not sacred by name, but sacred by memory. She has come here in sorrow and in happiness, in conflict and in peace. And the trees have always made space for her, not with answers, but with welcome. She sits at the feet of the oldest one, its trunk broad enough to rest against its roots, deep enough to keep her silence. She knows how it is to carry time, to be its vessel and its witness, and in this instant she carries it lightly like fog on shoulders. Now it is only again a tree, but the memory remains like the taste of a dream, and she places her hand against its trunk, allowing her beat to discover the slow rhythm of its roots. There are bolts of dyed linen billowing in the wind, like water shining with gold thread and deep purple. She does not move here. There are no eyes searching for, no voice crying out, no altar waiting for her to address. She stands there for a moment on a low stone bench outside and closes her eyes, not dreaming, not sleeping, just listening to the city speak to itself, the way it does when nobody is trying to quiet it. Water from a fountain nearby drips in time with the hammer of pigeons landing and taking off the roof, and all of it coming together in a little music unmeasured and unmarked. She is simply here, moving, breathing a cruel of light upon her shoulders like a dawn mantle. She looks up at the sky where swallows whirl and dart fast and swift like thoughts too, rapid to be caught up, and she lets them go without following after. There are jars of pickled lemon and rosemary and olives, black and round like polished stone. There is a woman with shovel-wide hands, building stacks of loaves of bread with care, and respect each loaf set as one lays down a newborn and close. By a young man sings the prices in a song, his voice high and clear enough to raise the spirits of anyone who hears. The baker's fire emits the scent of honeyed rising bread and salt and heat, and she stands, still there for an instant, letting the smell entwine itself around her like an arm. A boy sits on the step chewing a fig too large for his small hand, and he looks at her not with curiosity, but with recognition, as though she fits within this space of morning, within this scene of still work and light. She smiles with ease, a simple quiet thing that lives in her eyes more than upon her lips, and the boy smiles bashfully in return before he goes back to his fruit. Further along, the market has begun its full flower, no longer a murmur, but a song of calls and color and touch and smell. She doesn't shop today. She has no purse, no need, no desire for coin or commerce, but she lingers looking at the fabric of life, tightening between strangers who barter more than goods. She goes on walking, and the city closes up again in elbows of alleys and doorways that slope to hear a secret breath beneath them. Here the weight of her own skin is not oppressive, but known as if she has stepped entire into her own, perimeter into the very shape of her being. At the edge of the district, a public bath still closed, but steaming gently from its grills, the scent of cedar and orange blossom curling out and up like incense. A figure follows behind her, a priest perhaps, or a scholar, his robe against the stone and humming voice, some soft incantation, and she pays attention not to meaning, but to rhythm. And when she stands, she is taller not from increase, but because something inside of her has again brought her back in line with the ground, her breath with dawn. She returns to where the ancient fig tree leans, drunkenly over the verge of a low courtyard, its boughs burdened with fruit and shadow. The temple bells ring far away, not urgent, but sustained like the beat of something larger than the city itself, and then individuals pause midway. Through step, through word, through thought to listen, she walks onto the olive grove on the edge of the city, where sunlight filters less brutally through older branches and brown leaves, blanket the earth that crunches under her feet. She slows her breathing again, in harmony with the pulse of the land beneath her, not trying to control it, but letting it find its own rhythm. She remains there until the shadows shift, until the wind shifts, until the footsteps on the path behind her alert that the city is not dead, yet still summoning. The city opens to her again, not with noise, but with welcome, with invitation. Always woman and witness and wandering, always here and ahead, always beginning again. The sun now sits firmly in its arc, no longer overhead, but above remembrance, shining down on the world in brighter light. The streets no longer whisper, they hum, they breathe, they shine with the quiet sense of urgency of lives unfolding. She has no schedule, no chores, only a mission too. Soft to speak a motive that builds one step at a time, like a tale she is learning to narrate. His hammer is small, his chisel firm, and from the white marble, a face is starting to emerge, not yet but promised. She stands among them, silently folding her attention into theirs, and sees not just the marble and the tools, but the serenity in the eyes of the sculptor, the listening, the waiting. Then again, The chisel reappears and the onlookers linger, and she withdraws not because she has seen everything she was required to see, but because she has taken everything she needed. Children play after a hoop constructed from curved reed, their laughter cut and shattering the stillness of courtyards older than the city itself. A woman bears a basket on her head, eyes ahead, feet naked and unflinching, and the fragrance of herbs follows her like magic. She leaves no coin, but offers her breath, her stillness, her open presence, and for this she gets nothing and everything, a small transaction unmeasured by. And she goes on with that tiny gift tucked away in her, a new rhythm entered into the low-key music of her day. The smell of wool and oil lingers in the air, and something bright and cutting, perhaps dye, perhaps sweat, perhaps work itself. Women sit in rows so long their eyes intent their fingers weaving, and their silence is not empty nor quiet, but full of acquaintance. She travels a greater distance from the center through gardens that cling to terraces, and goats that move between islands of light. A cat lies among the roots, its sides rising and falling in quiet repose, and she kneels beside it, not to awaken it, not to touch it, but to be close to something so peacefully unruffled. The rooftops unfold beneath her, a quilted expanse of clay and light and shadow, the sea beyond like a sheet of hammered silver, reflecting a widening sky as she looks. She stands a long time moored and loose at the same time. She does not wish to have the cat sleep, but its stillness it's not questioning. She recalls how her mother peeled fruit with a curved knife, and how the peel dropped in perfect curves, and how nothing was ever discarded, not time, not air, not affection. She begins her descent slow, and measured on a different path, a winding one, by the site of an ancient theater, where the rocks still echo with voice, if you listen hard enough. The ghosts of tale linger heavy here, not haunting, but waiting to be called forward once more by someone brave enough to voice. The shadows themselves are longer now, stretching out before her, as though guiding her eyes down the path, or mapping what she will one day become. She does not fear darkness. She has worn it before as mantle and comfort. She only fears forgetting how to walk when no eye can watch, and she imagines sitting there and having her voice blend with theirs, but instead sits to listen. The world is wider here, less crowded, less hacked up, and she travels more slowly, letting her feet extend in space. But some gesture, some rhythm, some breath that carries itself forward without needing to be marked down. The day has slowed into something languid, gentle, and the city breathes a sigh that it has held since morning. The stone she sits on is smoothed out by use and time, and she leans back against it, letting the heavy burden of all things into her spine like an old remembered ache. The city breathes, and she breathes with it, one long pulse shared between them, one long moment flexed into time. She navigates the stillness without hastening, without searching. She is not waiting, she is coming. She is unconcerned about being forgotten. She is concerned about being misinterpreted, and so she goes carefully, not nervously, but with intent, putting sense into her steps, even when no one is watching. A single candle flickers in an alcove, and some coins rest close to it, unwatched, given freely to something intangible. She stands still for a moment, not to offer prayer, but to feel the stillness around it, the stillness that exists where faith has held on long enough to change the shape of air. Her hands are bare, but they are full, as if holding something unseen and formless, but holy. She has always loved watching work. It is well done watching bodies understand motion without having to question. Watching talent inherited like breathing passed down through blood and gesture and necessity. She thinks of how many of them she has sketched, how many she has severed, how many still stay entangled way, down deep inside her, waiting to be drawn into the light. One of the women looks up and catches her eyes and nods a small movement, but full of meaning. The linen awnings stretch out far across shops to soften the sun, and pigeons scatter on rooftops like loose thoughts unwilling to rest. She doesn't need shadow, but walks through light, tracing it against her face to her shoulders to maintain bend of her arms, as if to remind her that she exists. She does not seek the final shape, but the ritual of becoming, and she knows it because her own life too is shaped, the same way pressed and etched by moments that seem small but alter everything near the sculptor's studio. In a corner, there stands a small group watching a man shape marble with the ease of breathing. There is a spiritual element in work that requires patience, something sacred in the act of returning again and again to the same gesture, the same question, the same quest. The sculptor pauses, raises his hand to shield his eyes from the sun, and catches her eye for a gasping long enough to read. Something kind, not recognition exactly, but something resonant. The breeze strengthened, soft, but persistent, rustling the hem of cloth draped on doorways and raising dust in swirls of gold across the stones. She moves by a shrine jammed between buildings, almost hidden in vines and peeling paint. There is energy in such places, not for what they contain, but for what they carry of generations, the quiet of hope and repetition. Still further on, she arrives beside the whirling house, where spindles hum and fingers flash through yarn like birds in flight. She stands for a long time leaning against the doorway frame, unbidden though not unloved. The string is taut and long from hand to hand, and she thinks of all the unseen strings that bind humans, not just cloth and rope, but memory and narrative and faith. The sun is higher today, heat seeping up in soft waves off the rock, and she shifts again, wanting not coolness but motion. In a quiet corner of earth near a broken wall, someone has planted rosemary, and timed their scent rising sweet and strong with the heat. And from here, the city is other, smaller, softer, farther away, and she can see how far she has come without knowing. She remembers her mother then, not with sadness, but with complexity, with the kind of remembrance that resides in the curve of your hands, in the pitch of your voice, not only in anecdote, but in quiet. She questions what of hers will endure in others' memory. Not her name, maybe not her face. The wind shifts again, cooler now, with the scent of sea and salt and firewood, and she realizes that the afternoon has made the transition into evening, not through the sun, but through the manner in which air strokes skin. She stands where the chairs face nothing now but grass and wind, and she can envision them filled once more with torch and voice and wonder. The path narrows again among tall trees, their leaves shooting like tongues of fire into the waning light. By the time she reaches the lower quarter, the lamps are being switched on their golden, light seeping like honey through the streets. She walks past the same fountain earlier, now still and cold, and sits on its edge, letting her fingers trail through the water, letting the day slip from her skin like dust, like ash, like memory. And in that moment, with no name, no job, no crowd, she feels it again. The regular beat of something more than her, but not other, not foreign. She never talks, but were she to talk, it would be nothing much, something genuine, something like, I am here, or I remember, or I have not stopped becoming. And that would be sufficient. The sky has begun its gradual descent into twilight, its color thicker, now like aged paint, stirred once more into activity, each wind. A sigh now bordered with the whisper that heralds something concluding and something ready to begin anew in the weak light. That softens the world as boundaries. The city exhales and the air is heavier, and loyal companions painting her silhouette onto the stone with loving hands that do not demand anything in return. She walks like a person who has already reached her destination, but continues on for the sake of the journey, and powerful, and sure the pattern older than language and older than strife, the kind of knowing that lives in the hands and in the silence between generations. They pass without words in the line, with reverent hands and a slowness that bears witness to years spent in the small, holy tasks that hold the city together. She greets no one but is not alone. Every window, every doorway, every step shares this hour with her, but nods, and in that nodding acknowledgement of work of inheritance of the endless. Beauty in doing one thing completely and well, but to listen to the silence as it moves the stillness here is not empty but complete, filled with the softness of footsteps far away, the hum of water, the creak of shutters, the susurration of leaves, and the whisper of 1,000 yesterdays and golden curling around her like a hand on her back. Pulling her along gently, the boy who works there stands leaning in the doorway, eyes tired but friendly, and nods to her as she passes, and she nods back. Their exchange silent, but not meaningless. The kind of moment that will not be remembered, but is nonetheless significant now with memory, and with the scent of cooking fires, and she does not disturb them, for she too knows that posture too, a movement of asking, with no hope of response, only the need to speak into the emptiness, and be heard if only by the stones. And commerce yielding to the lower tones of homecoming and routine, the speech slows, the laughter ceases. The singing, if it comes at all, is muted, and done more for the self than the crowd, and it is here in this threshold, time this near darkness, that she finds her place most clearly delineated. She walks slowly now, her footsteps lighter than they were this morning, yet somehow heavier, as if each one takes more of the day's weight, but less of its burden. The shadows stretch out behind her long, and no one is being watched, and nothing is being required. She leans back, the wood firm against her, and lets the silence grow until it touches the edges of sleep. One has a name, a breath, a hope, a history, and how all those threads are always touching, always intertwining, always weaving something too vast to see. The city around her begins to shift its tone, not fade, but modulate the harsh clang of coin and starless gray, and she closes her eyes not to escape, but to enter the space within, where the stories that she keeps unfold and crease and settle to sleep. But tonight, she is not answer or echo or simile. She is just self. She is just silence. She is just the slow restoration of breath to body of mind, to peace of light, to dark, and dark to sleep. And she finds comfort in that, not erasure, not vanishing, but belonging in the fine fabric of something older and larger than she will ever fully grasp, and in that imagining she finds rest, the kind that seeps into the bones, and in the stillness between heartbeat and breath. She passes an old woman sitting on a stool in front of her door, weaving rushes into a basket, her fingers twisted. A group of kids runs past barefoot, by their voices tall and clear, and flailing their arms outstretched as if to grasp the remnants of the light in their open palms. They disappear around the corner like a dream. You cannot recall the moment you wake, but still carry with you for hours, their laughter echoing like a bell in the air behind them. And she smiles, not because she wishes to be them, but because once she was. The streets she walks now are narrower, closer, lined with the muted rituals of evening men, with water women shaking dust from blankets, an old man lighting the first lamp. She passes the bakery where the last loaves are pulled from the oven, the smell rich. There is a corner outside the baths where the stones remain warm, today holding the day like a memory, not yet willing to withdraw. And she sits there for a while, not to rest. She closes her eyes not to sleep, but to see more clearly, and behind her eyelids the world glows softly, not with fire or sun, but the kind of light that only comes when you are very still and very. Here she thinks of her own breathing, of how it moves through her like wind through a doorway, not hers to hold on to, only hers to feel, and she lets it come and go like the tide across the shoreline of her bones. The thoughts she has now are not loud, they are quiet and wide and full, like cloth laid out on a table, like hands holding water, like the second before music begins again. She does not sort them, she does not chase them. She lets them drop where they will, and in their quiet wait. She feels something she did not anticipate, not an answer, but a calming. She rises again, her joints whispering with emotion, but not in protest, simply in reminder that this body has lived, has borne and held, and carried the days and their demands. She doesn't resent the pain. She honors it the way a potter honors the groove of thumb in clay, the way a singer honors the rough edge of voice at the end of a long song. The final stretch of her walk takes her past the temple steps, now mostly empty save for a single form kneeling silently, head bowed, hands clasped not in prayer, but in supplication. She approaches her door and touches the wood softly, as if it might feel her approach, as if the house itself represents not her refuge, but her witness. And when the latch is lifted, she goes into a room that is neither broad nor high, but entirely hers. The air is hers in fragrance, an echo of her steps, and fading shadow of the morning that lived here. She undresses slowly, not with exhaustion, but with ceremony, laying aside each layer, as if not just fabric, but the parts of the day that had clung to her like dust. She places her sandals against the wall, her shawl over the bench, her jewelry in a clay bowl shaped by hands, like hers years ago, and then is still in the quiet, in the half-light with only herself. She bathes in cold water, her fingers certain and tentative, her eyes half closed, not in exhaustion, but in deference. She treats each part of herself with care, the way you would treat something you haven't learned yet to know. And as the water cascades from her skin, she feels it carry with it the traces of expectation and the fine grit of unnoticed thoughts. She wraps herself in the soft, worn linen robe, shaped to her body by use and years of repetition, and sits in the window, now wide open to the night. The night air stirs against her cheek like a question not urgent, but everlasting, and she breathes it deeply, letting it fill the spaces. Her voice never reached, letting it remind her that silence, too, is sacred. On the table before her sits one candle not lit. She doesn't light it, for the dusk is enough. The world doesn't need more flame, but more stillness, more moments like these when no one is acting. She thinks about the people she passed by, on the sidewalk of the man reciting poetry, and the woman weaving baskets of the kids playing, and the boy at the bakery. And she thinks about how each one holds a world, how each she envisions herself not alone, but as part of, not as one narrative, but as a page in many. The candle unlit the room dark, but not dim the street outside less. Noisy now, the voices stilled, the footsteps few, the sky above a soft tomorrow. She will wake once more, not rushed, not broken, and the day will ask of her what it always will, and it is enough. Morning returns not in light, but with patience, revealing itself in hesitant and muffled movements. A poor wash of light on the stone walls, and the quiet sound of leaves, as if the careless page were turning by itself. No alarm, no demand, only gentle permission to begin again, if one wills. She stirs as if emerging from a shallow sea, not stirred, not drawn up, but carried along smoothly by the tide of time itself. Her eyelids separate before her arms, and legs stir her breathing, already falling in time with the beat of the hour. And in that stillness she can hear the beat of her own heart, as if it were a caller tapping softly from within. This morning is not that morning, nor the one before. It is different. It is dense with a shift in the middle, an unseen change that can be sensed, but not observed, a sensation beneath the skin of something known coming back in another guise. A dream recalled after having forgotten the details, but not the mood. She remains still for an immense long time before she moves, not because she is afraid, but because she knows that the initial movement will break something, even if softly, the stillness, the silence, the spell. And she does not want to desecrate them, to shove through them, to claim this quiet for nothing, but as a space that needs to be breathed through. And she eats the rest of it, not out of hunger, but continuity for the silent strand that joins night to morning and states, "You are here, and it matters," but with complete sentences traded, like loaves, and even the dogs less inclined to bark, as though they as well are expecting something further. When she does stand, her body complies with her, as if it were an old friend who never stopped listening to her. Her spine uncurls, her shoulders roll back, her feet find the floor with remembrance instead of exertion, and every movement is a conversation between breath and muscle, between hunger and habit. Out of tune his fingers, tense his eyes, closed his mouth, shaping sounds inaudible to the ear, but audible to everyone. And she leans into it, eyes shut, letting the light inscribe something on her skin that only she will ever read, a silent poem, inscribed in heat and time. And she sits at the low piazza wall, watching not him exactly, but the air around him, how it thins away when music penetrates it. She does not dress. She allows the linen robe to fall open, lets air whisper against. Her skin allows herself to simply be here in the body that carries her in the form that time and choice and need have shaped. She is not looking in the mirror today. She is looking inward to where no glass can reflect. Her fingers trace a path across the wooden table, where the pieces of a half-eaten fig remain from the previous night when its skin wrinkled, but was still sweet. To remember that she is flesh, that she is temperature, that she is here, she sees the ripples flow out, one by one each, one carrying a moment she will never be able to say, but the intent still aglow, not with sorrow, but with awe. Some things are not meant to arrive, only to be born to write the truth that the heart had something to say. But warm, and she sits again this time, not to listen, but to consider the absence on how presence creates. A shape behind like a song, lingering after the last note has faded. Beyond, the street is slower than usual, as though the city itself has slowed down, vendors setting up with less urgency, neighbors greeting one another, not with nods. She walks with no intention today, and that is the fact. Not all roads need to end in purpose. Not every hour can be a doing. Some hours are for becoming, for looking, for giving space to open within and be filled with only breath, with scent, with colors, and the solid vibration of footsteps on worn stone, and places it on the sill, and inhales one final breath before night grips it, not tightly but all, and exhales it slow across the threshold from the light to the dark, wasting, and that at the center of her own self is a world as wide as the one outside, full of doorways and fountains and music, and hands waiting to be opened. She stands still on the edge of a tiny piazza where a player plays an old lyre, whose strings are off tune, but whose spirit is not. The sun is higher today, but not warm. It glances off rooftops like a hand running across water. It stays on her face in the heat of something remembered. She recalls a letter she never wrote words, written in the sharpness of a moment, folded and stowed in the back of a drawer. The ink has seeped away now. There is a section of the city that she does not frequently visit, but today her feet are there, of their own accord, down less swept streets and past unopened doors by her. The stones under her feet vary not from the rest, but from where, and she knows that even in a life breathed full and deep, there are places unvisited patiently waiting. A child gives her a flower without being asked, untraded, simply given, and she takes it with both hands, with thanks, not for the gift itself, but for the gift of the gesture, for the reminder that the world is still something that gives itself freely, without condition, without purpose, simply because it can, as she puts the flower before her ear to let it show. She pauses at a fountain in which the water flows slower than usual, nearly unwilling, and puts her hand in, letting the coldness prompt her. As the sun begins to slowly incline towards afternoon, she returns out onto the street, where the lyre player has stopped, where the bench is still empty. She writes nothing down. She does not write it in wax or clay or parchment. She holds it in her backbone, in her breathing, in the slow flexion of fingers. Along her flank, she knows that some memories are not for remembering, but to live again and again, every time in variation, but still true. And when she rises to return to the home in which she is nestled, the home bounded not by walls, but by ritual, she feels different, not altered, not remade, not reborn, simply more of herself. More here, more complex, and that is enough. That is something more than most days can provide, and she accepts it. The sky is beginning to shift once more, the blue deepening, shadows lengthening. She does not hurry. Now she goes at the speed of one who has learned to believe in time, not to give all to her, but to give her what she requires when she requires it. And that belief is her power, her guide, her unspoken anchor. Inside her room, the lamp sits dark, the water sits in its clay jug, the chair is shoved against the table as ever, and she strokes each, one softly, not to alter them, not to clean them up, but merely to remind them that she is present, that the day has brought. Her back not as conqueror, but as witness. She sits on the edge of the bed, not to get into bed, but to rest between strokes, between thoughts. She loosens the flower from her ear, and in the breath of it she draws again, But the day tried to teach her that stillness is not emptiness, that silence is not absence, that waiting is not. And when the sky is black and the first of the stars begin to sparkle to life, she does not feel alone, she feels whole. Evening does not fall. It creeps slowly, without falling, without collapse, as though the sky itself has let out its final breath of day, now lingers in a silence over the city in soft copper and violet that notes across every edge of the rooftops, every sill, every step. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't demand it. It merely slips away before the eye can notice shadows become long light, begin to fade away, the air grow cool. And still it all feels like a dance of tenderness, like the sky itself is tucking the world in under a huge and frayed quilt of dusk and forbearance and silence. Does not ring hollow, but earned her pace is not quick. It never was. And now she is well aware of the weight of hastiness, and what it steals from the soul. But for what they had been to her, only in memory, a touch of the world being young-wide and still for someone. And that is enough. She takes the quieter roads now, the less traveled, where stone holds the heat of the day a little longer. The market is hidden away, now baskets carried and empty shutters closed carts, groaning off, and the wandering aromas of spice and citrus and firewood, lingering on like gossamer memories, which refuse to be abandoned children, play in dust that glows with a golden sheen in the waning light, and she watches them not for what they are. The wind blows slightly differently, and is carrying with it the faint whiff of the harbor salt, and oil and rope and wave sounds, piled upon one another like very old music drifting through time and irrevocably and without leave, and she lets it penetrate, unresisting, letting the sound reconstruct her thinking, but not touching it. She lets that wind take her, and for a moment shuts her eyes, letting it sweep over her skin as if it might wash away the last of worry of thought of the day itself, as if it might carry her away. But she stays grounded. She always, not because she is afraid to float, but because she has mastered the form of where she is at home, and she chooses it not as a cage, but as a centering. The temple bells toll far away, not for her, not for any single person, but for the pulse of the city, for the moving of the hour, the christening of the moment, and she hears them as a friend, who softly whispers in a language older than memory. There's something in the sound that pervades her like water in stone slowly. She gets to a spot she doesn't frequent, a hill, beyond the last row of roofs, a spot where the sky yawns wider than any other spot, where the stars come earliest, where the air is sweeter to taste. No bench, no fountain, no table, only ground and sky and rock, and she sinks to the ground, slowly, legs folding beneath her palms, pressing into earth that still retains the heat of sun. And here she inhales, not out of need, but out of desire, each breath, a reluctant conversation between body and air, each exhale the releasing of something she did not realize she had. She recalls the women who came before her, who walked these streets, who bent over these very wells, who carried these same prayers on their lips before releasing them in smoke or silence. She does not name them. She does not have to. They show up in the straightening of her back, in the knowing of the hands, how to form dough, or how to braid hair, or how to comfort a stranger. They are in her in being there, in that she remains and departs and breathes, even when the world is too full or too barren. The stars begin to break the deepening blue, not altogether, but singly, careful, bold, firm. She watches them come on, looks at the shape of the sky change not as a map, but as a mirror, a reflection of all that stirs quietly within her, and takes from it one olive, some almonds, a heel of bread, and a creased piece of parchment. She does not wish upon them. She does not have to. She has abandoned asking the sky for favors and thanks, it instead for what is, and she holds it between fingers, not to feel the words, but to feel the hand which once wrote them. Underneath her the city begins to illuminate, in reverse candles alight, fires, stoked lamps, swinging between doorways and shadows, gliding like slow dancers across doorways. It is a beauty created not by perfection, but by repetition of every day, faithfulness of being present again and again for life, as it is not as it ought to be, She too senses that glow in her, not as light, but as heat, not as brilliance, but as presence, the still fire of one who has remained, one who has returned, one who is still there. She unrolls a tiny piece of linen from her satchel, places it on the rock beside her. She consumes slowly, not because she is hungry, but because it is ritual each bite rooting her further into the moment, into her body, into the now. The parchment is folded. She never unfolds it. It is not for reading. It is for remembering. A voice in the street below, a singing that is not good, but it is honest a melody, so ancient that even the stones could hum along. She listens not to the notes, but to the courage it takes to sing at dusk, to offer one's voice to the open world, without hope, without apology. She smiles not with her mouth, but herself, a tiny indulgence, a whisper in the dark, that there is loveliness in merely going on. When she finishes the last morsel of bread, she doesn't get up. She stays and allows the moment to unfold. Around her like clothes blowing in a languid wind, she remembers nothing and everything of the hands. She has held the places, she has walked the tailies that cling to her skin like dust and perfume and salt. And she gets them all to sit with her, not as heavy baggage, but as friends, as proof that she existed, that she continues to exist. Finally, her body insists that she stand. As she doesn't resist, she folds the linens and slides the parchment inside and redresses the package again. She brushes the dust off her skirt senses, the weight of her breathing in her chest, and begins to walk down the hill slowly. The stars shine brighter, the air is cold, and with every step she senses the day releasing her not with loss, but with trust. The house opens its arms to welcome her as if it never missed her, or perhaps as if it always knew that she would return. The light stays unlit, the water in the clay jug still, and the fig she left before dawn is gone, perhaps taken by bird, or wind, or forgetfulness. She lights the lamp not to defy the darkness, but to claim space for herself, for what is left, and what might yet arrive. She doesn't strip quickly. She doesn't hurry the day's end. Each fold of cloth back to its position, each pin that is loosened, each movement slow and deliberate, as if folding the day away with care. She stands in front of the mirror, not for appearance, but for presence too, to greet herself again, to affirm, yes, you're here, and this is you. She gets into bed slowly, not through tiredness, but because the body must respect rest. And she does respect that, as she does all things with gentleness, with solidity, with quiet. And when her head lies on the pillow, and her breathing is deep, she does not end the day. With a book she leaves it open, letting the night not ravage what was, but to carry it lightly into what will be. And in that final breath prior to sleep, she does not feel a pain or a sorrow, only a wholeness. She was there, she is there, and she is enough. Where stillness becomes the path, the stars did not leave, they merely eased. They folded into the blanket of morning. Sky their light cozied into the heavy respirations of the horizon as if it, too, needed sleep. The stillness of the early morning was not vacancy, but fullness, a sacred waiting place between the exhale of night and the initial inhale of day, where the world paused breath in soft reverence. Even the wind rolled with purpose and kindness, moving across the shutters like a worn lullaby, skipping her cheek and teasing the edge of the curtain with no urgency. This was not an awakening. It was a return not to motion, but to meaning, as if the soul came forth first and the body followed wordlessly in its echo. She opened her eyes in darkness, but not in fear. The dark here was not absence, but shelter. It was depth. It was the quiet reminder that beginnings do not always come in light. Her breath moved slow, measured like waves, carving the shore not in performance, but in remembrance. The body remembering itself, the heart remembering how to move silently. She did not uncurl, she listened, she waited. She let stillness fill her again, and again, until she could feel its shape harden into her bones like heat into water. The remainder of the world beyond her room was already altering, but she was frozen until the time selected her, until the breath beneath all other breaths rose and pushed her gently on the shoulder. She stepped out of her bed, not quickly, not with purpose, only in rhythm, barefoot, on the stone floor cold, beneath her feet like the ancient earth, welcoming her once again. The window opened not to reveal, but to invite. The first colors of morning were not colors at all, but shrouds of quiet light tracing across rooftops. Like whispering fingers across pages long forsaken, she lit no candle, she needed no flame, for in the sky itself a new light had come up, and in its pale illumination she moved with a sort of grace that accumulates not with practice, but with presence. Every step she made a decision, every movement an offering, every breath a note in the melody of her becoming and becoming and becoming in this world she has created for herself. Beyond the city, there was not loudly, not with noise, but with history, with weight, with the slow accumulation of time in doorways and stones and names half remembered. She passed through the door, where the wood still held the scent of old smoke, and the sunlight where generations stood and lingered and returned again and again. The street met her with dust and shadow, and with a wind that smelled of bread and iron, and the sea way out past the hills. The city breathed, and she breathed, and that was enough. The people had begun to stir their voices, still hushed their footsteps, eased by the politeness of morning, a politeness constructed of pause and patience and presence. She walked past the well where water still floated cool and deep and real, where silence sat like a bird on the edge of the stone. Grim wings folded breath slow. Her hand slipped once, not from thirst, but from memory, for the reminder of depth, of what is below, of what is sensed only. When stillness is allowed to lead, but as truth and noise that says, yes, this is true, yes, this moment is yours. The splash was soft and pure, the kind of noise that writes itself onto the day, not as event. And she sat there for a time, not to rest, but to witness, to be witnessed, to be included in a city that does not know her name, but always finds space for her feet. The sun had begun its slow pour over the eastern ridge upon the olive tree tops, like a whispered blessing, and the leaves glimmered not in brightness, but in joy. The market had begun to stir, baskets unfolded, fabrics unrolled, bread unwrapped, and yet she strolled listlessly, without purpose except to be. Every voice she heard, every scent she breathed, every stone beneath, each step of hers reminded her not to rush, not to overwhelm, but to receive, to stroll like a river, and not like flame, but in what she allowed to flow through her, let shape her, let knock her edges off into something more whole. And in that movement she found her anchor, not in what she held on to. She halted under an archway where ivy coiled itself around broken walls, and a bird sang on a roof beam, not for display, not for beauty, but because the morning demanded it to sing, and therefore it did. She laid her hand on stone, the wall smooth, worn down by hands like hers. Women like hers, moments like these, when quiet was greater than power. There she sensed it, the ache of stillness, the completeness of nothing, the aching emptiness that only breath can fill the knowledge. That to be is more fulfilling than praise. And she smiled not with lips, but with eyes, with heart, with the gentle delight of knowing she was home to this street, to this sky, to this instant, without ever having to earn it. The sky was pale gold, the kind of gold that overflows with memory and hope not, radiant, but shining like something that has waited patiently to be seen. The rooftops glowed in soft light, and voices began to rise in scattered bursts. A caller out for figs, a laugh from a child, a song seeping from a window with no end. She stood on a step where the tree's light curved above the stone, like the palm of a hand bestowing balance, and she shut her eyes not to run, but to ground herself, and the taste remained like a word she knew once, but no longer remembered how to speak. There in that blackness behind the lids, she saw not dreams, but memory, the kind of memory built only by living, utterly by proceeding slowly, by letting the world write itself inside her. The fig she ate wasn't sweet, it was truth, it was shaped, was the softness of something once hidden, now revealed in her mouth, and she chewed, not because she was hungry, but for grounding. She let its flavor take her back to her breath, back to the spine, back to the feet on rock warmed by the sun. And thus the day built itself not in noise, not in duty, but in tiny, holy recognitions of existing, of touching, of savoring, of halting, in order to see what always was. And as she got up again, the morning creased into her not as memory, not as striving, but as part of her skin, part of her way, part of her slow unrolling. She returned the same, but transformed, not because the city compelled her to, but because she let herself be shaped by it, by the beat, by the quiet, by the soft resistance of time. The room was not empty. It waited for her return like a friend who does not need stories, but presence. The lamp unlit, the basin still, the linen unruffled. She came in not to withdraw, but to carry what she had gathered, not objects, not plotting, not oaths, but only breath, only consciousness, only the soft grip of stillness made real. And she sat not to rest, but to honor the shape of her morning, the truth of her steps, the song of her silence, and the wide open heart she now wore like light on her chest, the path beneath the silence. There are days when the world stirs before you, and there are days when you stir before the world, and this was such a day where the quiet had not come to still, but to grasp, to cradle the moment before becoming. The darkness was still soft. The light had not yet kissed the rooftops, but the quiet carried weight, not waiting weight or grief, but holy weight of anything might happen. She was at the window long before the sun rose her hand on the wooden sill, cold with memory of night. The town slept, or nearly, so only the merest ripple of water buckets closing shutters and of doves tucking wings across the tiled rooftops. The air she breathed was not necessity, but reverence, as if with every breath the beginning of something holy. The air was heavy with held tension, the kind that clings to temple and doorway, and in the gap between word and reality. She moved not through habit, but through something enduring, something old and deep as rock, something in the bones that knew how to begin. Her body did not resist it, obeyed her with wonder, muscle to muscle, breath to breath, as if the night had washed it clean of resistance. The cloak she threw around her shoulders did not cover her. It wrapped her like dawn itself, enfolding her not to conceal, but to unite. And her feet touched earth, the way memory touches heart, without asking permission or understanding. She did not say a word, for there was nothing which could not be said, and left, unspoken by silence. And apart from that, the words would have been too loud, too new. Instead, she stepped out onto the small landing, that one covered in clay pots of thyme and basil and wild mint that had seeded itself. Leaves remained closed, their green folded inwards, but she touched them anyway, as if to welcome, as if to say, "We re still here." Below the city lay a quilt of roofs and smoke, and the noise of nothing loud, just the gentle rearranging of the pieces that made morning. She did not walk a path. She followed a rhythm, her rhythm, the slow turning of time within her chest that led not to places, but to presence. Her sandals rustled, rustling against the dust her feet, like prayers, meant only for the ground, meant only to be touched and not heard. And when she reached the fountain in the square, she sat beside it not for respite, but for belonging. She dipped her fingers into the water, and the cold grit skinned her, and allowed her eyes to close just low enough to feel the day's breath begin. There were no shoppers yet, no sellers, no calls, no ring of cash, only the grammar stone and water, and birds beginning to remember their songs. The world was not waiting for her, but it made room for her, and that was enough. She listened to the sea, though she could not see it, a long, slow murmur behind the row of buildings, like an old man humming to himself. And that sound seeped into her chest, filled up the cups behind her ribs, reminded her that even the expansive knows how to whisper. She stood up, because she didn't have to, and walked towards the street, not because she needed to go anywhere, but because the street was quietly beckoning, not by name, but by rhythm, by breath, by the warmth which was beginning to travel from the stones at her feet, like a memory surfacing. A woman passed by with a basket of lemons, and nodded, not in greeting, but in acknowledgement, as if to say, "I see you still unfolding." And she nodded back her hands, tracing the rim of the cloth on the basket, as if blessing the moment rather than the fruit. She followed a small, distorted path between two ivy-covered walls and scratched initials and pieces of antique posters worn to poetry by weather and years. The walls breathed too, not with mouths, but with body, with memory, with the feeling that you are never alone. And when she arrived at the small courtyard, with the slouching olive tree pushing sideways, from stone she sat beneath its roots. The tree was not big, but it was real. Its roots, grasping earth that had given up trying to resist a long time ago. There in that still chiseled spot she pressed her hand against the bark, felt the slow life moving beneath. And with that touch she remembered all she had left unsaid, the things she had not told the parts of herself she had stored away for some undefined day. But here in this silence, in this reverberating courtyard, those fragments rose like smoke from embers, not with grief, but with welcome. They came to sit beside her, not to haunt, but to return like family who never really left, but needed silence to return. Time did not pass here, not in the way clocks tick off seconds, but in the way rivers remember it, in the way bones hold it. She sat not knowing how long, only knowing long was not measure, only depth, only breath, only presence. And when she got up again, it wasn't because the moment had passed, but because it was now part of her. She carried it not like a task, but like a warmth under the ribs, a light weight that changed the way she moved. She stepped again into the street, now stirring, now speaking the vendors, setting out their tables, the children running shadow and one another. And yet she didn't quicken her pace. She moved as one who had already come, not to a place, but to a knowing, to a deep inner stillness that imbued every step with holiness. A man passed by singing very softly, and though she didn't know the language, she knew the tune, because it was the same as her breath. She stopped at the edge of a building where a big window reflected the morning light, and in it she saw not her face, but her presence. Not a photograph, but a presence. The figure of a woman built not of body, but of ritual and silence, and 1,000 unspoken steps. She did not smooth her hair or knot back her robe. She simply looked and nodded. Not in approval, but in fact, yes, this is me. Yes, this is the road. Yes, this is the way. Later in her room once more, the Maya clay bowl on the table caught the edge of sunlight and glowed gold, as if lit from within. The flower that she had left on the sill had wilted not into rot, but into form that now was newly beautiful. And she handled it not to retain, but to respect, to utter, I recall. I see you, I still bear your hue in my bones. She placed it in the center of the bowl, along with the stone she had carried once from a distant river, and the yarn someone gave her without cause. The room was quiet, but this time it was filled not with expectation, but with coming with the wholeness of one who had walked far into the world and come back whole. She sat again by the window, not to see the city, but to hold it inside her chest, where it now flowed slow and steady, and her breathing kept rhythm with it, every in-breath a home, every out-breath a prayer, every instant a soft unfolding into more of herself. There would be other days, other walks, other fountains, other fig trees, other letters never written. But today, this was enough. Not the enough that closes the book, but the enough that turns the page with fear. And so she sat, and she breathed, and she listened. And the world did not answer, but it did not have to. It merely had to remain, and so it did. The space between the noise, the day had settled into its middle rhythm, not yet slow with fatigue, but no longer hurried with expectation. The hours stretched long and golden like fabric, unfurling over the shoulders of the city, the sounds of life, softened by distance, filtered through open windows and courtyards, where the sun pooled in silence. Instead, but simply for being a small part of the stillness, for letting the air pass over her skin, like a forgotten hymn that remembered her name, even if she had forgotten the melody of sound, and the world turned gently, without asking too much of her for once. She sat by the edge of the colonnade, where light and shadow danced without urgency, and the stone floor held the memory of the morning. warmth beneath her palms. She was not there for prayer or performance or even reflection enough to settle. She did not reach for them. She had learned that some truths only arrived when left alone, when given room to approach, not with answers, but with the shape of understanding. Children played nearby, their laughter echoing against walls older than memory itself, the sound not interrupting our quiet, but folding into it, becoming part of the fabric that held her upright. She did not look toward them. She only listened, letting their joy exist alongside her stillness, like water and stone, two truths, resting beside one another without needing to blend, and the sound moved through her like a thread, pulled through fabric, a reminder that time was not hers to hold, only to feel as it passed through her hands, like grain or water. Or light. She did not rise. She did not answer the bell. She let it pass. Her thoughts did not come in words today. They moved like birds above the sea, sometimes landing, but mostly circling above, waiting to find a place soft. She breathed as if the air might remember, something her body had forgotten, a rhythm older than speech, a silence thicker than thought. And each exhale carried something away, not sorrow, exactly not weariness, but a kind of weight that had never been named, only worn. She let it go without ceremony, without needing to define it. Because she was finished, but because the moment had moved on the way, a tide pulls from shore without permission, and she walked not toward anything specific, but away from the place where stillness had held her, and now asked her gently to let go, her steps soft, her breath steady, her mind still tethered to something she could not yet name. A breeze moved through the portico, lifting a curl of hair across her cheek, and she did not brush it away. She let it rest there, let it remind her that even in stillness there is movement, even in quiet there are voices, and not all of them are her own. The world does not stop, it only slows enough to be heard if one chooses to listen. She thought of names she had worn like cloaks, like armor, like chains, the ones given to her and the ones she chose, and how each one shaped her voice and her silence in different ways. She thought of the time she stopped answering to one and began to live beneath another, and how that shift was not liberation, but transformation, and how sometimes she still missed the girl she was before the world asked her to become something useful. The temple bells rang faintly in the distance, not to call or command, but simply to mark the passing of another hour. A man passed by selling dates from a woven basket, his call low and familiar, and she met his eye for just a moment, not to speak, not to buy, only to witness and be witnessed. And in that small exchange, there was more honesty than in most conversations, for there was no demand, only recognition, and sometimes that is more than enough. She closed her eyes not to sleep, but to see more clearly, and in that darkness behind her lids, she walked streets. She had never touched, watched waves. She had never sailed, sat beneath trees. She had never climbed, and yet each place felt like a room she had once entered, a life she had almost lived, and she welcomed them all like old friends, returned without warning and breath, in the space between the noise, and when someone asked where she had been, she only smiled and said, "I was listening." The voices of the city changed tone as the sun dipped lower, softened by the arrival of evening preparations, the scent of bread and citrus rising in slow spirals, the distant beat of a drum, the sharp bark of a dog, the crackle of oil as it met the pan, and every sound layered upon the last until the silence was not empty but full of all the things it allowed space for. She rose slowly from her seat, not once again stories she has carried in the folds of her mind, like delicate threads woven through the fabric of her being. Every glance, a thread pulled taut, revealing glimpses of a life lived between moments, caught between shadow and flame. She remembers the laughter that once danced freely here, the hushed whispers of promises made beneath the cloak of night, the fleeting touch of hands that traced her name like a prayer across the length of her spine. And all the while the city listens, silent and knowing, as if it holds each memory close like a lover's breath pressed against the nape of the neck. There is a path behind the olive grove where few people walk and fewer still stop, but she turned there today, drawn by the way the light filtered through the leaves, casting a green-gold glow on the ground like a sacred map drawn only for her. And she followed it not with expectation, but with curiosity, letting the trees lead her without question, with a steady, patient strength, as if to wash away the pain and carry it out beyond the horizon, where it dissolves into the endless blue, the scent of salt and wet stone, and the brief sweetness of connection that is all she knows, all she ever will know beneath the endless sky and the watchful eyes of the stars. And the city breathes around her. She feels the quiet pulse of time moving beneath her skin, like the slow tide pulling at the shore, drawing her ever onward into the mystery of what comes next. The fragile hope that glimmers just beyond the horizon, like the first faint light of dawn, promising another day, another chance, another moment, to be remembered in the endless story of this city and of herself that will come like a soft sigh at the edge of the world. And all the faces blurred together in a mosaic of light and shadow that shifts beneath her closed eyelids, each one a fragment of a life lived in the spaces between darkness and light. And she wonders if they too felt this same ache, this same restless yearning that drives her onward through the endless streets, the quiet pulse of the city echoing in her blood like the distant call of the sea, a call she cannot resist no matter how far she walks, no matter how many nights pass beneath the watching stars. Carried on the breeze, reminding her of distant places she will never see, and of a freedom she can only taste in dreams. When the city sleeps, and the night is hers alone, to roam the empty streets and listen to the quiet music of her own breathing, and the soft sigh of the wind through olive branches above, and in their cold fire she sees the echo of 1,000 dreams and the weight of 1,000 regrets, tangled together in the endless dance of desire and loss. Her heart beats steadily beneath the quiet surface, like the slow turning of the tide drawing her thoughts inward to the well of her own solitude, where every breath is a question, every pause a silent answer. A small bench waited there, weathered and low, its wood grayed by sun and softened by moss, and she sat again, letting her body find its rest, as if it had known all along this place was needed. And her hands fell open on her lap, her fingers uncurled, and she let the earth hold her, not as guest, not as intruder, but as part of the silence itself. She began to hum not a song, but a sound, a tone that rose from her chest and met the air like smoke without fire. And she let it carry whatever she could not name, fear and fatigue and memory and desire, all braided into one long note that dissolved before reaching the end of the trees, and she did not need to finish it. She only needed to begin. Above her, the clouds shifted not hurriedly, but with intention, casting new shapes across the sky, and she imagined them as old gods, speaking in gestures, not words, saying, "We are still here. We still watch, and not every story must be told to be real." And she let their silent blessing rest upon her shoulders like a second skin. When she stood this time, she carried something with her, not visible, not heavy, but presence, something gathered from breath and shadow and the sound of her own hum echoing back into her ribs. And she knew it would stay until it was ready to leave, and when it left, it would leave behind only what mattered. She returned to the city, not as one returning home, but as one returning from home, a kind of place, not made by walls or streets, but by stillness. And they nodded, not because they understood, but because they knew they were not meant to. And that, too, was a kind of grace. The sun lingers low behind the distant hills, spilling its golden light over the whitewashed walls and narrow, twisting alleys of the city, where shadows grow long and soft like whispered secrets across the stone pavements. Her feet move lightly against the cool roughness worn, smoothed by centuries of passing souls, each step a rhythm in the ancient heartbeat that pulses beneath the city. As skin, the air is heavy with the scent of jasmine and salt, carried from the sea, mingling with the dusty fragrance of sun-baked earth, and faint traces of smoke from hearth fires, sparking life in darkened rooms just beyond sight, yet always present as a subtle hum in the background of everything. She breathes it in deep, filling her chest with the memory of countless evenings like this, where the world seemed to pause, suspended in the tender amber light that catches on the curves of her skin and the edges of the stones beneath her toes. Her eyes drift upward, tracing the outlines of crumbling arches and weathered statues worn by wind and time, their expressions softened, as if waiting patiently for stories to be told. The air shifts now cooler, brushing against her skin with the softness of a lover. Sigh stirring the loose tendrils of hair that frame her face, reflecting the deepening colors of the sky, bleeding from rose to violet. And then to the deep blue of coming night, the stars begin to awaken one by one, distant pinpricks of light that pierce the dark velvet canopy. She pauses beneath a narrow balcony, draped with trailing vines heavy with tiny white blossoms, their scent delicate and fleeting like the touch of a lover. Hand before dawn, and she allows herself a moment to close her eyes, to listen to the language of the city. The distant clatter of carts over cobblestones, the murmur of voices rising and falling like waves, breaking softly against the shore, the soft scrape of a wooden shutter being drawn open, the creak of old hinges in the cool evening air, the faint clinking of coins exchanged between hands laden with longing and desperation, and all around her, the pulse of life thrumming steady and slow as the eternal rhythms of the sea. In this quiet reverie, she feels the weight of centuries pressing down like a shroud, and yet beneath it, the restless spark of her own existence burns, bright, a single flame flickering against the vast expanse of time that stretches endlessly before and behind her. She thinks of the men who come to her seeking escape from their own lay shadows, the fleeting touch of warmth they find in her embrace, the fragile beauty of those moments when two lives intersect, and for a brief instant the world narrows to the curve of a smile, the brush of a finger, the soft sigh of a whispered name, carried away by the wind to vanish like smoke in the morning light. Her thoughts drift to the stories hidden beneath the stones, stories of love and betrayal, whispered by the ghosts that haunt these streets, the laughter of children chasing one another through the alleys, the quiet prayers muttered by women lighting candles for lost husbands, the sharp edge of longing etched into every glance exchanged in the dim glow of the tavern, the slow unfolding of hope and despair tangled like the vines that climb the walls, their roots deep in the dark fertile earth beneath her feet. She imagines the sea beyond the city, its vastness, a mirror to her own restless heart waves breaking endlessly against the shore. Time slips slowly past like the slow turning of a great wheel, the hours folding into one another seamless and eternal, and she moves through them, like a shadow tracing the outlines of her own desire, the soft warmth of a stranger, hand the sharp taste of wine on her tongue, the faint glow of lantern light flickering against the walls, and in the stillness she finds a strange kind of peace, a fragile balance held between longing and surrender, between the ache of loneliness. Her body is a map of stories written in the language of touch and memory, every scar a poem, every curve a testament to the life she leads woven into the fabric of this ancient city where past and present entwine, like lovers in an endless embrace. And as the night deepens, the night is a canvas stretched wide across the sky, painted with the soft silver of moonlight and the deep shadows that curl like smoke through the narrow streets. She moves through it like a whisper unseen, but felt the faint scent of lavender and myrrh lingering on her skin, a reminder of dreams once held and lost, and the soft sound of her footsteps on stone, the quiet rhythm of a life that continues despite everything, despite the passing of time and the shifting of seasons beneath the eternal watch of the gods, whose statues look down from high places carved from marble that gleams cold and white against the darkness. She stops before a small shrine nestled in the corner of a forgotten courtyard, its worn altar covered with offerings of fresh figs and wildflowers, the delicate petals trembling slightly in the night breeze, as if alive with the breath of the city itself. As she closes her eyes to listen to the silence, the weight of history pressing close around her like a protective cloak, and in that stillness she feels the pulse of her own heart, mingling with the ancient rhythm, the slow, steady beat that carries her forward through the long night and into the dawn. Memories rise like waves, breaking gently on the shore. The touch of a hand that lingered too long, a taste of honey and wine, the sound of laughter carried on warm summer air. She opens her eyes to the sky once more, the constellations etched like ancient stories across the heavens. A tapestry woven of light and shadow, and she feels herself a single thread in that great fabric. A momentary flicker in the endless flow of time, a breath held softly between the past and the future, and in that knowledge there is a strange kind of freedom, a quiet acceptance of the life. She leads in the city that holds her like a lover whose arms are both warm and unforgiving. And so she moves on the night, wrapping around her like silk, the soft sound of her footsteps blending with the murmurs of the city, the whispered prayers of those who sleep and those who watch the slow turning of the world beneath the steady gaze of the gods. And in that unfolding she finds herself again, not as the woman others see, but as a soul walking the edge of dreams, a voice carried on the wind, a light flickering softly in the endless night. The dawn arrives, slowly folding itself over the city like a whispered promise that trembles in the soft light, spilling through narrow windows and down the worn stone streets. She lies still for a moment, feeling the last weight of night linger on her skin, the faint chill from the sea breeze threading through the cracked shutters and stirring the loose strands of hair that fall across her face, the scent of salt and jasmine, weaving with the distant hum of awakening life below the city, breathes in deep. And so does she, slowly drawing the morning air into her lungs, feeling the hollow places inside her with the fragile warmth of a new day. The room is small and plain, yet alive with shadows that dance on cracked walls. As the sun climbs higher, the rough plaster catching flecks of gold, like scattered memories that refuse to fade. Her body aches softly from the long hours spent holding the weight of others, desires pressed close against her own, the tender ache of skin that has learned to endure the touch of strangers, as if it were a language spoken without words, a song sung beneath the breath. And in that ache there is both sorrow and strength, a testament to the life she leads, written in the quiet curve of muscle and bone. She rises slowly, letting her bare feet find the cool floor, the rough grains of stone grounding her in the present, despite the pull of dreams that drift like smoke. Just beyond reach, the smell of strong coffee brews somewhere nearby, mingling with the sharp tang of citrus and fresh bread, carried on the morning breeze from the market that tumble from baskets in the market below. The city is alive with the promise of survival and the quiet struggle that marks each new dawn. One another between stalls bright with colors and scents that fill the air, the harsh bark of vendors hawking their wares, the gentle clink of coins exchanging hands, and too many dreams forgotten. And yet beneath that weight there is a flicker, a spark that refuses to be snuffed out, the fierce pulse of life that pushes her forward through the long hours, the soft caress of light on skin, the sharp taste of wine and salt, and the fragile thread of hope that weaves itself through the fabric of her days. A reminder that even in this city carved from stone and shadow, there is still room for longing. A rhythm steady and relentless as the tide that carries all things away and brings them back again with endless patience and quiet purpose. Her own thoughts drift like driftwood caught in the slow current, pulled by memory and desire, tangled in the ever-shifting flow of day's streets that will soon flood with voices and the clatter of carts and barter the city. Awakens around her a slow crescendo of life that spills into every corner. And cobblestones, the murmur of voices rises and falls like waves breaking gently on the shore. The scent of roasting meat and spices, mingling with the faint hint of incense from a distant temple, the slow, steady pulse of life moving through the streets and alleys, weaving a tapestry of light and shadow, sound and silence. And she steps into it like a thread pulled taut between the hands of fate, the night stretching out before her like an endless road to be walked, and known every shadow, every breath, and she feels herself part of it, a single thread in the tangled weave of waking day. And burnt cedar drifting on the breeze, mingling with the distant salt and sharp tang of sea, spray the air alive with the restless pulse of life that never truly sleeps. Outside the window, the sea sparkles with the light of 1,000 flickering stars, reflected in the endless blue, and she watches the fishermen hauling nets, heavy with silver gleam, their faces etched with the patience and toil of generations before them, the cries of seagulls breaking, the stillness sharp and clear like a sudden call to attention, and the smell of fish mingling with the sweet dust of crushed olives and fresh herbs. She moves through the morning like a ghost slipping between lives unseen, and yet felt the soft murmur of voices drifting up from the street. The laughter of children chasing that marks the life. She leads a dream that flickers like a candle caught in a draught. A distant shore waiting beyond the horizon. A life that the sharp tang of salt and wine and the faint sweetness of jasmine perfume lingering in the air as she moves through the crowd, her body moving with practiced grace, the slow rhythm of her steps matching the beating of a hidden drum. The ancient cadence of desire and survival, woven through every gesture, every glance the flicker of candlelight, casting a golden glow on weathered faces lined with years of hard-living lanterns flickering in windows, casting long shadows like ghosts on the walls. And in that solitude, she feels both the sharp sting of isolation and the deep pulse of freedom, a reminder of wounds, both seen and unseen, the fierce heat of passion and the cold sting of betrayal woven together in a complex tapestry, a slow and steady river carving its way through rock and earth, that she carries with quiet dignity beneath the surface, a quiet strength that sustains her through the long hours and the endless nights, the relentless turning of days and the slow unraveling of time, moving ever onward toward an unknown and unknowable future once again, beneath the steady gaze of the gods carved in marble high above the streets, their cold eyes watching the endless turning of time, and she feels herself caught in that turning, a single thread woven into the great fabric of the city, a momentary flicker in the endless flow of life, a breath held softly between shadow and light. The paradox of a life lived between walls, both physical and invisible, a life that moves through the spaces between belonging and exile, between desire and denial and true, beneath the ancient sky, and in that pulse she walks forward, always forward, tracing the outlines of her own desire, the sharp edges of pain and the soft curves of hope, the tangled threads of memory and longing woven together in the endless story of the city and of herself of the city beneath her feet, the faint scent of jasmine and salt carried on the morning breeze, the soft murmur of waking voices blending with the distant song of the sea, and in that moment she is both lost and found, both shadow and flame, both prisoner and free, caught in the endless dance of desire and survival that marks the life. She leads the city she loves and the time she cannot escape and the soft curves of longing, and in that movement she finds a strange and fragile grace, a quiet poetry, written in the language of breath and touch and silence, a song sung beneath the stars, a story told in the flicker of a candle flame, a moment held softly between the past and the future. And quiet resilience, she steps inside for a moment, drawn by the warmth and the steady pulse of life. The way strangers become entwined in the soft and silent language of bodies, speaking without words of longing and loss of fleeting joy and deep sorrow, the clatter of cups, the scrape of stools against stone, the soft laughter that spills like liquid warmth into the night might be hers, if only she could reach beyond the city walls and the heavy weight of history and pain that bind her here. But for now, she walks the streets, a shadow among shadows, a light flickering softly in the heart of the ancient city, carried onward by the steady pulse of time and the endless rhythm of the sea. Her reflection in a cracked mirror catches her eye, a face framed by dark curls, with eyes that hold the weight of too many nights. The hours pass slowly, and the sun climbs higher, turning the white walls into rivers of gold and shadow. She walks through the crowded streets, feeling the eyes of the city, On her the mixture of reverence and dismissal, the hunger and the fear that dances like fire beneath the surface, and yet she holds herself steady, a quiet strength like the ancient trees that grow stubborn and proud beneath. The harsh sun their roots deep in the rocky soil, refusing to be undone by storms or drought. As the afternoon wanes, she finds herself by the shore, the steady pulse of the waves, a soothing balm to the restless ache inside her, the smell of salt and seaweed thick in the air, the cries of gulls, and the distant call of a lone boat cutting through the water, leaving a wake of white foam behind it. She closes her eyes and lets the wind carry away the sharp edges of the day, the memories that cling like shadows, the longing that burns like a slow fire beneath her skin. And in that moment she is both lost and found adrift on the edge of something vast and unknowable. The evening gathers softly, wrapping the city in its cool embrace. Lanterns flicker to life one by one, casting pools of warm light that dance on the walls. Her footsteps echo softly as she moves through the gathering darkness, the familiar faces of other women passing like ghosts. Beneath the flickering lamps, their eyes shining with the same mixture of weariness and fierce hope, the sharp scent of wine and perfume lingering in the air, the whispered promises and unspoken bargains that mark the rhythm of their world, and beneath it all the steady beating of a heart that refuses to be broken, the quiet determination to survive, and to claim the small moments of joy that come like shards of light through the cracks in the stone. She knows the night will bring its own demands, the weight of touch and the sharp taste of breath against skin, the tangled sighs and soft moans that rise and fall like music in the dark, the bitter sweetness of longing that lingers long after bodies part, the fragile threads of connection woven between strangers in the quiet spaces where desire and loneliness meet, and she moves through it all with the grace of one who has learned to carry both pain and pleasure in the same breath, to hold them lightly like a fragile flame against the wind. And yet beneath the surface there is a deeper ache, a yearning for something more than the endless cycle of days and nights, the slow unraveling of hope and despair. The night folds over the city like a vast and heavy cloak woven from the threads of shadow and whispered secrets, and beneath that darkness she moves like a quiet flame, flickering against the vast expanse of sky, the weight of the day still resting soft and dull against her bones, yet somehow less oppressive now, as if the cool breath of night carries with it the possibility of release, the faint scent of myrrh. Her footsteps are soft and sure against the uneven stones, worn smooth by centuries of passing feet. Each step a quiet assertion of presence, a thread woven into the great tapestry of this ancient city that holds her like a lover's arms, both tender and unyielding. The lantern light flickers nearby, casting long, dancing shadows that reach out like spectral fingers, curling and twisting in the quiet corners and crevices where memory and longing gather like fragile moths drawn to the glow. She pauses for a breath, letting the night press close around her, the cold kiss of the air like a balm to the slow ache that pulses beneath her skin. She remembers the faces that have brushed against hers in these streets, the men whose eyes hold stories of loss and desperation, the women who walk beside her in silent camaraderie, each one a fragile flame burning with the fierce stubbornness of survival, the sharp laughter and the bitter tears, the fleeting moments of tenderness stolen in the spaces between transactions, the soft sighs exchanged in the dark, the tangled threads of connection that bind them all in a fragile web of humanity, fragile yet unbreakable as the stones beneath their feet, the unyielding city that watches and waits with silent knowing. The smell of roasted lamb and sweet honey drifts from a nearby tavern, mingling with the faint scent of wine and spices and the low murmur of voices, rises and falls like a tide, carrying with it fragments of stories told and retold beneath the heavy beams of ancient wooden ceilings inside the tavern. The air is thick with the mingled scents of sweat and smoke and spiced wine, the soft murmur of conversation, a low hum that vibrates through her bones, the eyes of strangers briefly meeting hers in fleeting recognition, a shared understanding of lives lived on the edge of society. Outside again, the night deepens, the stars blazing cold and distant overhead. Constellations etched like ancient scripts across the black velvet sky, and beneath them the city breathes. A slow and steady breath, the distant cry of a dog, the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze, the faint clink of a distant bell, the subtle chorus of a life that never truly rests. And in that steady pulse, she finds a strange kind of peace, a fragile balance held between the ache of loneliness and the fleeting sweetness of connection, between the sharp edges of pain and the soft curves of hope. And in that balance, she moves like a shadow, caught in the eternal dance of light and dark. Her thoughts drift like smoke rising from a dying fire to the men who come seeking what she offers, a brief respite from their own loneliness, their desire to touch and be touched, to feel the sharp sting of life running hot beneath their skin for a moment. She is both sanctuary and storm, the tender wound and the healing balm, the fleeting fire that burns bright and then fades, leaving behind only the faintest glow, the memory of heat and light in the cold darkness. And she wonders at the strange intimacy of these moments. She remembers the long nights when the city sleeps and she walks alone through empty streets, the soft click of her sandals on stone, the cool night air brushing against her skin, the scent of wild herbs crushed underfoot, the distant echo of waves breaking against the shore, the faint glow of her body is a map of stories, every scar a chapter, every curve a poem written in the language of touch and memory, the soft ache beneath her ribs. She thinks of the city itself, a living thing carved from stone and salt and shadow, a vast and intricate labyrinth where past and present entwine like lovers in an endless embrace, the worn steps of ancient temples, the faded frescoes that whisper of gods and heroes, the narrow alleys where secrets hide like shadows beneath olive trees, heavy with fruit, the soft murmur of prayers carried on the wind, the sharp cries of children playing in the sunlit courtyards, all woven together in a great and timeless story that moves beneath the surface of everyday life like. And beneath it all the sea stretches vast and endless, a mirror to her own restless heart, the endless horizon where sky and water meet in a fragile and shifting line, the steady rhythm of waves breaking against the shore, the sharp tang of salt carried on the breeze, the distant song of fishermen calling to one another across the dark water, and she feels herself part of that endless flow, a single drop caught in the great tide. She moves through the night like a shadow, caught between worlds, between light and dark, between hope and despair, between the sharp edges of pain. The hours slip slowly by, the night deepening into dawn, the sky shifting through a palette of colors, from deepest indigo to soft rose to pale gold, the city awakening. And as the first light touches the rooftops, the stones glowing warm beneath, the soft kiss of the sun, she pauses once more, letting the quiet stillness wash over her, the slow, steady pulse. And so the story continues, the long, slow turning of days and nights, the fragile beauty of moments caught between shadow and flame, the quiet pulse of life beating steady. The sunlight streams through the shattered shutters of her small room, falling in long, thin folds of gold across the rough stone floor. The city is already waking, the soft buzz of voices rising from the cobblestone streets, below a chorus of hushed hope and troubled dreams. Outside, the scent of warm bread blends with the bitter taste of sea salt on the breeze, carrying the promise of a new day stitched tightly into the fabric of this worn place. She stays immobile a moment, longer, the heat of yesterday's sun still softly on her skin, and faint scars tracing the story of her wordless existence. Her eyes meet the cracked mirror drunkenly, propped against the wall, the glass broken and smudged like the memories within, and she searches for her own reflection, for something, strength or gentleness, hope or surrender, comprehension. All must live within this delicate shell mind, braiding memories and desires into a tapestry too vast to unravel. She recalls the women who live this existence, with sisters of light and darkness. There's laughter and tears mingling beneath the city's watchful eye. The acid taste of envy burns once, at the fringes of her heart for those who might have sweat and dust the motion simple. Sacred a small ritual of remembrance and rebirth, her fingers locate the worn rim of the basin, the chipped porcelain cool to her touch. And she allows herself a moment of quiet. The city is not patient, and yet here, in these minutes of silence, she makes space where time loosens its hard pace, where the beat of her own heart is loud, enough to hear above the noise. This day, like all the others, will demand strength and grace, surrender and resilience, and she prepares herself to meet it not as a victim, but as a woman who knows the depths of her own desire and pain, years of passion and loss of love and of pain. The narrow alleys bathed in the warm light of the sun retain the recollection of footsteps. Long past the joy of children playing between the stone walls, the distant song of merchants calling figs, olives, and pomegranates. Sweet the pungent scent of herbs, trampled under careless feet, and the far-off echo of prayers. Whispered beneath the towering marble pillars of forgotten temples, she breathes deeply and allows the city to seep into her bones, the heat face reminding her of gentle hands and whispers in her ear. The fleeting caress of one who had dreamed once of freedom and flight, now only a specter haunting the recesses of her mind. But even in the shadow of that memory she finds strange comfort, reminder that there is beauty in things that have been broken, and that the city itself is a witness to persistence, to the slow, insistent pulse of life that cannot be vanquished, of the sun, the cool dapple of the cypress trees, the faint touch of silk against her skin, as she moves, a living part of this place where time does not exist, lived another destiny, or who still harbor the slim possibility of freedom, but it is extinguished by a stronger tide, the adamant, unyielding will to live. She stands at a corner where the scent of fresh figs mixed with the smoky stench of burning pine, the thin alley turning away like a secret to be revealed. Beyond the turn, she can see the soft whisper of water flowing somewhere hidden, and the gentle laughter of children playing an ethereal sound like glass breaking softly in silence. A ritual as old as the city itself, and beneath it all the gentle hope that someday these threads might weave together. The cool spray feathers her face, and for a moment she closes her eyes, imagining herself as water running free, untrammeled by stone or shadow. A spirit on the wind beyond reach of desire and despair. Laughter rises from a distant tavern, voices raised in song, and the clashing of cups and plates. The rhythm of life going its endless round under the fading light. She looks at the lives packed into these small reminders, the hopes and terrors stitched into fabric, the unheard prayers taken on the threads that connect her to what will never be regained and to a future not yet written. She breathes deeply at the mix of smells and sounds and lets them fill up the vacant spaces within her, a fleeting comfort for the night ahead. But even as the vision blurs, it vanishes like mist, the weight of her body, the leash of the city pulling her back to reality. Theirs is a fabric that crosses with hers, a weave of strength and quiet rebellion, a testament to living in a world where little mercy is ever given. She feels their presence like the night is poised in her breath, waiting for the first steps on the stones, for the beginning of the endless ritual that is her life here, where love and despair become inseparable under uncaring stars. A world of fleeting touch and unspoken goodbyes, a place where each glance bears a weight and each kiss bears a mark not all external, but seared deep in the heart, a warm fire burning steady in dark. Cold, uncertain night, a reminder that she is never alone, even when the weight of the world crushes her like stone. Each moment a strand in the rich fabric she weaves of her own blood and breath, a survival story told in the language of body and heart. She finds herself sinking into this rhythm, drifting like smoke through cracks and crevices, an invisible presence, and yet felt. Her thoughts weaving the old stones, the tailies etched into their surfaces, the ships clumped into the fabric of the city, like threads in an endless tapestry. She takes deep breaths of the cold night air, allowing it to fill the hollows inside her, the empty spaces searing with pain and hope, the lifelong contradiction that defines her life. She lifts her face to the heavens, tracing the constellations. Learned in childhood stories from dancing firelight, the pattern's a map of hope and destiny, a wordless tongue written across the dark, great canvas above. Her own universe contracts and expands by the passing moment, a fine dance on the edge of shadow and light, a witness to the irrepressible nature of life. The breeze begins to cool, and night wraps the city in a velvet cloak, full of secrets and desires, breathed upon the winds of men and gods. Lost and found a woman between worlds, between the old stones beneath her feet and the infinite sky above a thread in the great tapestry of time. A story still being woven beneath the eternal eye of the gods of her own story, in light and dust, a story told in the language of breath and touch and silence. A story that is still being unwound under the unblinking gaze of the gods. Each shadow has its story, each face a reflection of her own complex weave of hope and despair, of strength and frailty, intertwined in the endless dance of this ancient land. She recalls the acrid scent of sweat and wine, the coarseness of skin against hers, the soft sighs and muffled names which dissipate into morning silence, each encounter an exquisite moment, suspended between love and pain, an exquisite thread uniting her and the world beyond the walls of her tiny room, and gentle over the old stones, and every breath heavy with the detritus of history. And still, awaiting, she glides softly through the winding streets, her feet tracing practiced routes, smoothed by countless others, before her each step a measured beat in the perpetual waltz of endurance and release. The screams of the market have softened now, interspersed with the distant thrum of life, settling into the between moments. Hush, a lull, where even the wind seems to hold its breath before nightfall into something new, something whole and unbroken. But for now the city calls, and she has to go. Its crooked streets like a shadow, poised between dawn and dusk, between wanting and existing, and listens to the slow, steady pulse of life moving beyond the walls, a rhythm both bitter and gentle, harsh, yet comforting. Her body weighs heavy and light, simultaneously burdened with the ache of long nights and boundless touch, but supported by the strange hardness that comes from remaining alive day by day in a city built on shadows and rumors. The rough linen sheet falls from her shoulders as she pushes herself into sitting position, muscles straining under skin kissed by sunlight, and the pale light reveals the faded lines. The streets throb with the cry of vendors hawking their wares, children dodging between legs and carts, the distant clatter of horses' hooves on stone. Every sound pierces through her. Her gaze drifts to the little window framed in heavy wooden shutters, slightly ajar, the cool morning wind caressing loose. Hairs about her face beyond the endless blue of the sea glints in the early sun, a sea of wide and restless breaths calling softly with the promise of forgetfulness and freedom. She draws deep breaths of the salting air and lets the longing stir quietly within her, a flame too intangible to seize yet, burning brightly enough to drive her on through the endless revolving of night and day. Somewhere out beyond the city walls, a world lies wild and unexplored, but here under the weight of history and the endless sky, she remains rooted like the ancient olive trees that slope the hills, their gnarled branches outstretched and holding fast. She rises slowly and crosses to the small basin in the corner of the room, the cold water jolting against her heated skin, washing off yesterday. Her thoughts return to the men she encountered today, strangers whose eyes and hands speak the language of loneliness and desire, whose touch is a transient balm and a splintered bruise all at once. She recalls the delicate tightrope she'll all have to balance between giving and taking back the pieces of herself that she can never give whole each encounter, a story written in perspiration and breathed names in fleeting looks and twisted bodies. She has a simple tunic, the rough fabric cool and soothing on her skin, and gathers the small stack of items she carries like precious jewels. A wad of coin, a worn prayer token from a forgotten temple beyond the city thrums with the dawn sun every step ahead. A note in the great hymn of this earth, and when she steps into the light, the air rings with possibility and silent peril with the hard edge of lust and the slow unfolding of a story still being written under the watchful eye of the gods. The streets stretch out before her like an old river that weans through the city, and in it bring the tales of 1,000. She passes by the market where colors explode like an artist's palette, red tomatoes, deep purple eggplants, honeycombs golden, and the scarlet fire of chili peppers heaped high in woven baskets. The murmur of vendors rises and falls like the sea, a constant rise and fall of voices. Haggling laughter and smarting tongues, pricking eyes, watching every step, every movement, every smile. And she is a silent witness, a shadow gliding through the tide of life, unseen yet deeply felt. The faces which pass in front of her tell the story of struggle and lines of desire on the creased skin of an old fisherman maps of the ocean. The bright eyes of a child carrying a battered piece of wood, the strutted stance of a merchant guarding his precious wares, and the sidelong glances of the other women like her sisters trapped in the same cycle of survival. And love, they speak a secret, language of looks and silence and the crease of a smile and the slope of a head, a language learned in the furnace of this city's hard heart. She stands beside a fountain where water spills over chilled stones, singing a forgotten song, the sprays mist on her. The sun is higher warming the stones at her feet, the acrid scent of rosemary and thyme rising up from the gardens tucked away behind crumbling walls. The lute hanging on the air, blending with the muffled clatter of hooves and the heavy rumble of prayer, carried on the wind, a tapestry of sound and scent and light coming together to form the fabric of this day. A day, much like so many others, made up of little things that sparkle like stars on the big black canvas of her life. She remembers once more the sea, the endless blue over the city walls, an endless and unknowable thing that summons her with the siren's call of freedom, and forgetting the waves crashing against the rocky shore, the salt spume cooling on her skin, the endless horizon where sea and sky meet, blurring the lines between heaven and earth, and she cannot help but question what there is beyond what stories are left, untold in places where no stone remembers footsteps and no walls hear secrets. But here she is, at least for the time being, in this city carved of stone and memory, from yearning and bereavement to city, that holds her like a lover, fierce and fragile, a city that looks with the eyes of the ancients as she moves through its streets, writing the lines. The sun of late afternoon encompasses the city in a honeyed warmth, like a silent witness to crawling passage of time where shadows stretch long. Her skin still remembers morning sun, the warm heat beneath the cool of her tunic, the soft glow of sweat blended with the scent of jasmine and dust that sticks to her like a second skin. The city breathes around her a living mosaic of light and shadow, stone and flesh, a murmur of prayer drifting up from distant temples, the scrape of leather sandals against stone, the whispered bargains struck behind shut doors. Her heart tightens as she envisions the men who will visit her tonight, those strangers with eyes that carry loneliness like an open wound, whose touch is evanescent comfort and a reminder of all that is lost. She walks past a fountain where water sparkles in the fading light, the surface broken by floating leaves and the small ripple of a small fish blasting below the surface. The scent of spice in the evening drifts from a nearby kitchen, heavy with garlic and herbs, mixed with the piercing sting of roasted lamb and hot bread. Her fingers brush against the frayed scarf which she wears, a piece of fabric worn down through time, and touch a memory of something precious lost, or perhaps never found. The heavens grow dark to a soft violet, and stars begin to inscribe themselves through the twilight like distant promises or lost dreams. She walks now with resolve, her feet planted in spite of the ache deep inside her bones, the soft swoosh of fabric against stone, the insistent thud of her heart, a drum calling her into the moving dark. Her thoughts turn to women who walk this path with her, the sisters of darkness and silence, whose laughter and tears echo through back streets and behind doors. The city throbs under her feet, the rhythm of so many lives pulsating through the veins of the streets, the soft light of lanterns like gentle halos of light and shadow, the soft, hush of voices merging with the distant cry of the sea. She stands on the threshold of a small door. A breath, a momentous pause before stepping out into the night. The known mixed with the unfamiliar, the promise of touch and the anguish of distance. Her body glides with refined skill of one who has mastered the delicate balance of giving and holding. Back the parts of herself to hold back the sensitive dance of self-protection and letting go. As night descends, the city relinquishes the quiet spots, thick with the glow of daylight confidences and furtive kisses. The scent of oil and musk mixing with the darkness, the heavy breathing and murmurs of philharmony, of desire and freedom under the watchful eyes of long silent but always present gods. The moon rises slow and wan, throwing a silver light that softens the rough edges of flesh and stone. The city in dreamlight, where fantasy and memory blur the edges between what is and what has been. And here she is. The shadows deepen, and the city sighs with the weight of secrets and whispered promises. The now shadowed streets become a backdrop on which longing and survival are twined beneath the muted glow of oil lamps. Burning like phantoms trapped between worlds, she moves with a practiced quietness through narrow corridors and open courtyards. The rough stone cool beneath her bare feet, the fabric of her gown whispering softly against her flesh like a secret shared only with the shadows. The air is dense with the scent of blooming jasmine twined with the faint astringency of spilled wine. And the distant smoke of fires burning low in hidden hearths, deep in secret places of this ancient city. Her thoughts drift like leaves on a slow stream to the moments yet to be lived, the delicate balance of desire and detachment, the soft sting of needing and the more bitter edge of guarding, the vulnerable places of herself that cannot be given the gentle ache of wanting and the harder edge of defending. And for a moment, she shuts her eyes, imagining herself a part of this flowing water, free to wander beyond the city walls, weight of her body lightened by the gentle current carried to far-off horizons, rhythm of their toil, a heartbeat in the quiet night, a counterpoint to the weak body. Its narrow streets and tall walls hold the whispers of untold lives, each step a story etched upon the rough facades. The laughter, the tears, the whispered names of those who have come before, a silent chorus beneath the stars. She feels herself a part of this great, weaving a thread fine yet unbreakable, connected to the pulse of the city and the timeless beat of light and darkness and spirit. She must guard and yield in equal measure in the endless exchange which fills her days and nights, the delicate balance she will maintain between giving and holding back. The portions of herself that cannot be surrendered is a silent vow, a shield forged in the flames of experience, each a frail bridge built of flesh and breath, a fleeting refuge from the cold, indifferent world beyond. She is a city woman, a thread in its ancient weave, a story written in the language of breath and touch and silence. Beneath the eternal eyes of the gods, her breathing comes slow and steady, the cool night air filling her lungs, the ache in her limbs. A reminder of the cost of every moment of survival. The city hums beneath her feet, the heartbeat of 1,000 lives pulsing through the veins of stone, the whisper of voices blending with the distant rumble of the sea. Night is captivity and refuge, a space in which pain and longing twine in the silent dialect of touch and surrender. And passing caresses the delicate dance of desire and detachment, where each moment is a thread pulled taut between survival and surrender and power. The city is a living shade and maze of light and shadow, where each flicker of lamplight speaks secrets on the coarse walls, secrets of love and grief, of hope and despair, woven in the ancient stones beneath her feet. She drops to her knees and lets her fingers brush the chilled water, the sensation sharp and alive. A fleeting contact, grounding her in the present even as her mind wanders to somewhere distant from these narrow streets, distant from the intricate web of stone and shadow that is her world. Each encounter a tender story told without, words in the language of skin and breath, a ritual older than the city itself, and beneath it, all the soft ache of longing that never quite fades. A flame deep inside her, that shudders in the darkest corner of her soul, and hands speak of hunger and loneliness, a need for connection, even as they bring with them the cutting edge of pain. And sweet refrain that wraps around her like a whisper, a reminder of sorrow and beauty, knotted in the city's endless song. She is a woman who has learned to walk the razor's edge between survival and surrender, clearing a space for herself in the heart of the city. She moves through the streets like a specter, tracing the lines of her own story in dust and light, the soft rustle of her dress on stone, the steady heartbeat pulsing time in the endless unraveling of night and open. And the air is sweet with salt and wildflowers, not the heavy scent of sweat and longing that clings to her skin now. She clutches this hope to her like a talisman, a faint light in the dark, dark night. She wonders if those dreams are still there beneath the scars of pain and survival, if they burn still like coals waiting to be fanned into flame, or if they have simply died out into the darkness like so many broken promises and loss of hope and despair of the quiet strength that develops in the stillness between moments. She is a part of this tapestry, a thread woven through stone and shadow and light, a story still unfolding beneath the eternal eyes of the gods, a testament to the insistent rhythm of life. Her path is familiar, and yet strange, a journey made 1,000 times, and yet each step a discovery, a hesitant unfolding, a slow uncovering of the story she carries within. It is a moment suspended between worlds, a fragile breath held in the vast tapestry of time, when past and present and future merge in the gentle glow of evening. Every touch is a trade, a careful balance of giving and holding back. The vulnerable spots in herself that need to be hidden, a dance performed in the dark, beneath the indifferent gaze of stars long silent but never far away. The city wakes slowly, the soft murmur of voices rising like a prayer, the scent of fresh bread and green herbs, carried on the chilly morning air. She takes a deep breath, letting the new day enter. Her lungs the perfume of beginnings, mixing with the hurt of yesterday. The ancient step of shadow and light, taking its slow turn under the infinite sky. Their faces merge and shift in her memory. A gallery of forgotten moments, each one a thread in the tapestry of her life, and flickering candles, a testament to the prayers and hopes of those travelers who passed this way. Seeking solace or strength, or perhaps forgiveness, she lets her fingers make contact with the rough stone, the coolness anchoring her, the flickering light, casting soft shadows that dance like phantoms on the walls. The city around her is waiting with bated breath, the night stretching out before her like an endless sea. Beneath the eyes of the gods, she breathes in deeply, letting the cold air fill her lungs, the quiet strength of the darkness wrapping around her like a cloak. Their laughter and tears echo through the alleys, the soft whispered sound of words spoken in secret places behind heavy wooden doors. A language of glances and gestures, spoken without words. They carry their own stories, etched in lines, etched on their faces, in the quiet strength that blooms in the silences between moments. And in this moment, she is both naked and untamed, balanced between the worlds of light and dark, of hope and despair. Each touch, each glance, each whispered word, a piece in the fragile mosaic that is her life, beneath the eternal gaze of gods long silent but ever vigilant. But when she opens her eyes, the stone and the darkness receive her again, planting her firmly in the here. And now the ancient pull between escape and endurance. The face she will meet tonight has a story overlaid with hunger and loneliness, a quiet cry beneath the rough surface of calloused hands and weary eyes, and steady, like the hum of a distant song that binds her close in moments of doubt and darkness. The night folds around her like a velvet cloak, hiding secrets and desires whispered under the breath of gods and mortals. A dance of light and shadow, a story still unfolding in the endless turning of time. There is strength in their presence, a quiet resistance that smolders beneath the surface. The unspoken solidarity of those who endure, knowing that each night survived is a victory over the implacable forces of fate. The dance she must perform is old as the city itself, an ancient ritual written in touch. She wonders if they look, if they have turned away uninterested in the transient lies played out before their eyes. The image slices through her with a sharp pain, a hunger for meaning and mercy in a world that is sometimes cold and unforgiving, yet even in the silence of the gods, she finds a strange comfort, a reminder that she is a part of something larger and eternal, and silence in the language of bodies, reaching for connection, even as they build walls to defend against the pain of loss. She recalls the laughter of her sister shadow women who walk this road, weaving their own threads into the tapestry of the night, their voices gentle. The cold night air is with the whisper of distant prayers from temples, where the gods recline beneath marble and stone their faces. Smoothed by centuries of wind and time, her footsteps stop at a fountain, where water gently trickles over worn stones to surface, mirroring fleeting starlight like diamonds scattered. The mist brings relief to her skin. The scent of leather and oil comes from a workshop nearby, where artisans shape wood and metal, their hands sure and steady, coaxing beauty from raw material, a reminder that there exists a world beyond her own, where creation and destruction walk hand in hand. Her mind wanders to the city itself, a living thing carved from stone, and memory from desire and sorrow. The moon rides high now, throwing a pale silver glow that softens the cold edges of stone and flesh, the city bathed in a dreamlike radiance where reality and fantasy blend and slip apart. She moves once more into the gentle pool of lamplight which spills across the cobbles, the sound of her footsteps mingling with the distant music of a lyre played somewhere in the night, a melody sweet and haunting like a memory half remembered. Her thoughts drift to the men who will visit her tonight, strangers with work hardened, hands, eyes heavy with sorrow, whose caress comforts and wounds. She remembers the soft glow of candles in her small room, the worn feel of her tunic, the faint scent of lavender and myrrh that she uses as a night talisman. And as the stars slowly turn above her, she clings to the paradox of her life, the gentle strength, the quiet defiance, the limitless hope contained hard within the night of despair. The city breathes in the dark, quiet hours, when the world is stilled as if it too holds its breath, beneath a sky heavy with a tapestry of stars that glint like jewels tossed across the endless black velvet of night. She moves unseen through the darkened streets, the cobblestones worn smooth. Chill beneath her feet, a steady beat that echoes the slow, strong pulse of her own heart. The cool night air clings to her like a whispered secret, soft and fleeting, bringing with it the faint tang of wild herbs crushed beneath the foot, and the sweet musk of distant orchards heavy with ripe fruit somewhere beyond the walls, where the wild earth begins and the city's heartbeat fades to a gentle hum. Her thoughts drift in this solitude to the weight of the day, now lost, the hours spent in whispered names. The night is eerily lovely, its silence more profound than the noise of the day, the soft rustle of silk against stone, the distant shriek of a lonely owl piercing through the stillness, a melody of isolation. She pauses in a small square, where a fountain gently drips its water, capturing the pale light of the moon, the surface ruffled by the slow descent of leaves, drifting lazily from ancient trees that guard secrets of centuries of forgotten dreams. The scent of jasmine and myrrh wafts on the air, mixing with the rich earthy aroma of damp stone and crushed herbs, the very essence of the night itself, a heady mixture that stirs memory and longing. Her thoughts turn to the women who walk her path, the sisters of the night, sisters bound by unspoken bonds forged in the fire of shared pain and survival. She was recalling the men who come seeking solace or escape those strangers whose eyes. The cold wind carries the far-off sounds of song from a tavern somewhere, a plaintive. Her body aches with the weight of hours of giving and holding off the slow erosion of self that occurs with each passing moment. But within this pain, there is a stubborn pride, a silent defiance. The knowledge that she is greater than the sum of her wounds, more than the shadows which cling to her like a second skin. She stops before a small shrine tucked away in a quiet corner, a simple altar strewn with dying flowers. The moon climbs upward, throwing the streets into silver and shadow, the air thick with the scent of earth and spice the soft. Murmur of voices carried on the breeze, blending with the distant sigh of the sea and the sigh of olive trees gently swaying in the breeze. Her mind drifts to the dream she once had, dreams of escape of a life beyond these walls where the sky stretches wide. And yet, even as uncertainty bites at her heart, there is a stubborn spark, a quiet hope that will not be denied the possibility of something more, something outside the endless cycle of giving and taking, of touch and withdrawal. She moves on through the twisting streets, the city, sounds and scents wrapping around her like a living shroud, the soft clatter of feet, the murmur of voices, the faint scent of herbs and wine, and the far-off laughter of children tucked away in warm homes somewhere beyond the reach of this night. The city vibrates with the heartbeat of 1,000 tailies, each one a thread in the vast tapestry woven of love. And as the night drags on, and the first pale fingers of dawn touch the horizon, she finds herself standing at the doorway of a new day, a tentative breath held between the dying night and the coming light. The city transforms under her feet as the first hesitant glow of dawn begins its slow, gentle siege, sweeping aside. The last shadows like soft waves erasing the footprints pressed in the sand. Stones under her feet warm, as if exhaling with the earth itself, awakening from its long night's sleep in sweet spices, whose perfumes commingle in the morning. Chill like an ancient perfume. The creak of wooden carts, scraping stone sounds far away, added to by the harsh yells of vendors hawking their wares, their voices rising. The air is alive with the hum of bees, flying to minute blossoms, the soft rustle of leaves, their joyful voices merging with the scent of freshly baked bread and roasting. Meat drifting from surrounding kitchens mixing with the damp smell of wet stone and pressed herbs. The city comes alive slowly, its tapestry of sound, smell, and color, layering itself like a living thing where every corner holds a story, and every face wears infinite lives together, interwoven throughout time, and the far-off cry of a solitary shepherd watching his flock far away on the hills beyond the city walls. She breathes deeply, letting these impressions fill her rich brocade of life, desire, and loss intertwined in every stone. Every street a reminder that she is both part of and separate from this world, a strand woven into the endless tissue of time itself and silence. The fragile dance between giving and denial, the fragments of herself that must be held in secrecy, yet, even as the shadows gather, there is stillness of defiance, a defiant flame that is not to be extinguished, the knowledge that she is more than the sum of her, wounds more than the whispered names and fleeting caresses that occupy her days. A gasp hovering between shadow and light, a history inscribed in the lexicon of gasp and touch and silence beneath the vast implacable sky, beneath the all-seeing eyes of stars that do not sleep, and the waiting gods who conceal their secrets in stone and flame and hushed winds. The air cools gradually as the day breathes out and the warm golden light gives way to a soft amber glow. The dampness of the coming night enfolds her like a cloak, a refuge from the acridity of day and the hunger that waits in darkness. Her flesh carries the mark of the day, the heat of touch lingering, and the ache of smiles wrenched and the brief usurped. Respite twixt moments of survival, the sisters of the shadow gather under flickering lights, their faces in mosaic of hope and exhaustion of survival and hurt. Each bears her tail folded like an open flower under layers of disguise and purposeful makeup under walls, built around hearts that ache to be seen and heard. They exchange glances sharp and understanding, a silent communion born of nights shared and wars fought silently against the hard world. Each caress a ghost, the recollection of lives brushed briefly against the face of the old city, the reminder of the transitory nature of human touch, even in the most dismal alleys, but between its leaves. 1,000 stories to be told, the whispered winds and the annihilating losses, the whispered secrets and the hidden realities. The cycle begins again, and she knows. The dance will continue, the eternal journey through shadow and light, pain and hope, survival and surrender. But in this fragile moment, between darkness and light, she feels something timeless and unbreakable, a thread of life embroidered across the centuries. A fierce stillness strength forged from endurance and the indomitable will to keep moving on. She walks on beneath the stars, her shadow a whispered defiance of the seeping night, a held breath. Twixt worlds a flickering spark that will never die is a daughter of the city, guardian of its secrets, a carrier of its wounds and its hopes. Her story is written not so much in the worn stones beneath her feet, as in the pulse of the air, the sheen of light upon water, the endless hymn of breath and touch and silence under the endless, unyielding sky. The eternal city watches over her, the gods unchanging, but there their eyes carved in stone, their secrets written in the wind and the sand. Her heart grinds on at the knowledge that she is not merely a face gone into the mists of time, but a living story, a voice woven into the city's endless song. She strides purposefully through the labyrinth of alleys where the murmurs of the night gather and wind like smoke, weaving their stories into the stillness. The weight of friendship wraps around her like a balm, but under it is the constant tension, the unyielding reality of the night. Ahead, the infinite tango between submission and control, between agony and the fleeting taste of gentleness. The future she dreams up in silence in the farthest reaches of her soul, where hope is a flame that burns in the wind. The yearning for a life without fear, the hope to reclaim the shards of herself she has lost through years of silence and survival. The city below her is a crucible, a region where dreams are forged and broken, where light and darkness converge relentlessly, and where she walks still refusing to be cleansed by the weight of her past or the cold indifference of the night. The city waits without them calmly, a sprawling maze in which every shadow can hold salvation or betrayal. Their footsteps sound like reverberations, weaving a convoluted rhythm through the streets. The insistent beat of women who walk the dividing line of morning and night. Both the streets begin to drain their usual bustle and fade to a quiet hum as the market closes shop and the stalls are wrapped up for another day. The scent of wood smoke and roasting meat curls through the air with the soft salted breath of the sea on the evening wind. The city sighs a weary sigh, the pulse slowing but still steady just beneath the surface, like a secret heart beating softly in the dark. The stark disparity between this peaceful, serene moment and the wild, dark dance of night fills her with an odd mixture of sorrow and hope, a reminder that life is always spun of shadow and light, pain and grace. The coolness awakens her skin, and the sound is a balm to the deep pain hidden in the folds of her existence, reminding her that even in most hostile places, there is life and beauty and the constant threat of rebirth. The moon rises, pale and watchful, casting silver light that glints on the roofs and flashes on the rippling water of the distant harbor. The city's old stones seem to glow in this soft light, their cracks and scars telling centuries of joy and sorrow, love and loss, written quietly in the script of time. She pauses to look up the vast sweep above, remembering her own littleness under the boundless sky, but feeling the stubborn spark of life burning fierce and unyielding deep within their lives. Are hers a richness of toughness and hidden rebelliousness, a testament to survival in a world no more benign than it has to be. She feels their presence like a steady flame burning steadfast in the freezing, dark, uncertain space, a reminder that she is not alone, even when the weight of the world is coming down upon her like stone, merciless and unyielding. She allows her fingers to graze the water, its sensation razor-sharp, alive and transitory, a fleeting connection to the world beyond the crooked skein of stone night and agony that forms her journey. The air grows warm, heavy with the scent of baked bread and overripe fruit, the hum of voices building in the thronged market, the ring of blacksmiths hammering at metal, a harmony of life that beats steadily beneath the ancient stones. She moves through this tapestry of life, a living strand sewn through stone, flesh, and light, a story waiting to be told under the eternal gaze of the gods, under the endless blue which has watched over lovers and beggars and dreamers since the very dawn of time, and falling on a crazy symphony of life, piling itself onto the ancient tapestry of the city. Her skin still holds the residual warmth of night, the perfume of jasmine and sweat blended with the crispness of morning cool. A reminder of the gossamer thread that binds the present to the past, spinning her story into the fabric of the city's infinite song. The soft caress of linen on her skin, the warm touch of a shared smile, the whispered promises made in darkness that vanish like mist with dawn. Every recollection a delicate petal tucked into the secret garden of her heart. A delicate beauty which sustains her through the long night, endless days, and the unspoken pain that lies beneath them all. The air around her is thick yet clean, still full of the scent of night flowers that cling fiercely to their petals. Like precious jewels kissed by morning dew, the world hangs poised on the brink of time. A moment before the sun rises high, and she navigates these waking streets, an invisible witness to the slow unrolling of day, the pulse of the city throbbing steadily like a heartbeat, through the narrow alleys and open courtyards, bearing with it the soft murmur of life, resuming again after the long night of whispered secrets, stolen kisses, and silent vows that waft like ghosts among shadows. The din of the market starts to stir in the distance, a low thrum of voices bargaining over sweet figs reeking with juice. Her feet instinctively trace the worn path to a small temple, tucked softly among massive stone walls, where the scent of incense ascends in pale, spirals intermingling with the morning air, like an offering to the gods. The statues of forgotten gods stand in wordless vigil, their faces worn by centuries of wind and rain, their eyes closed in eternal thought, muttering forgotten prayers that float through the ages. She stops here, feeling the weight of history gently pressing against her heart, the stories etched in stone, the prayers whispered into empty space, the hopes lovingly folded into the fabric of the city, like secret threads waiting to be found. Sunlight filters softly through the leaves of ancient olive trees, casting dappled shadows that dance upon the earth, their silver-green branches softly swaying in the warm morning breeze. She makes her way to the heart of the city, her steps mellowing softly against the quiet narrow streets, suddenly bursting into wide sunlit squares, where children play with weathered wooden toys, their laughter ringing clear and bright, like a promise unblemished by the burdens she carries. Her thoughts drift inward to the fragile, quiet moments between meetings, the small spaces, where she can catch her breath and remember who she is beneath survival and disguise. She stands beside a fountain where water sings over old stones, their surface disturbed only by the occasional ripple of a small fish darting through beneath. The city pulses around her, the eternal rhythm of feet and voices blending with the distant song of the sea, a soft susurration of olive trees, swaying in the breeze, and the fleeting scent of herbs and spices carried on the breeze like mysterious whispers from a bygone age. Her heart shatters with the knowledge of the coming night, the inevitable slide back into the habit of touch. She looks on the women who move thus as sisters of night in silence, whose laughter and tears echo through the streets and behind closed doors. The sun rises higher, anointing the city with golden light, the shadows drawn back slowly before its relentless advance. And as the day unfolds around her, she carries with her the fragile hope of rebirth, the unspoken strength created in endless night and whispered prayer, the searing pride of a woman who has learned to walk the razor's edge of survival and of surrender, creating a niche for herself in the heart of the city. Sun sets low now and casts long shadows that stretch out like fingers reaching across the city. She moves with the shadows of the night, her steps dropping soft and sure upon the hard stones, known yet unknown at once, like memory's caress on skin. The stars begin piercing the sky, small sparks exploding in the great black velvet above women. As voices begin to rise as the city goes into night, their laughter low and surreptitious, their footsteps swift and purposeful. She steps into their realm for an instant, exchanging words soft and guarded, heavy with unspoken definition. Her mind goes to the dreams she dare not speak. She remembers faces that passed over hers, the fleeting moments of touch, the stolen tears and laughter, the hands that cupped her with care or brutality, or Desperation. The night falls, and the city wraps itself around itself, like a book closing on purpose. As the initial light of morning begins to creep the horizon, her stride quickens the dawn's promise of freedom and a new kind of burden. And so she stands at the threshold of morning, her breathing level, her heart softly roaring beneath, the still water ready to face the day, to walk again the labyrinth of stone and stories and lives entwined. She